Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Today is Friday, June 24th. Um, I think we probably should cover the elephant in the room just so that I can move forward and not talk about it throughout the rest of the stream. According to Reddit, the Supreme Court actually did decide to overturn Roe versus Wade and other decisions after Roe versus Wade, throwing the abortion issue down to the states in the United States, several of which of the United States had trigger laws to immediately limit, severely curtail, or to outright ban abortion in the first place. Um, Not really in video game related, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about it. I have talked about video game companies talking about it, and really they had really no business talking about it. They would have been much better paying politicians, bribing politicians or lobbyists, than putting lip service on Twitter. Uh, I will just say personally, this is an odd turn of political events, in my opinion, because I had always looked at the Roe versus Wade situation as a political football, is what they call it, something that they just kick down the road and pass back and forth between the Democrats and the Republicans as something to get the base fired up about, and and something that they were never actually going to act on, or never actually going to make any laws on, either in Congress or the Senate or even in the Supreme Court decisions. Uh, it recontextualizes a lot of the events of the past, a lot of the heavy efforts, whether legitimate or not, in your opinion, to prevent certain Supreme Court justices from being appointed. It certainly highlights a level of power that the Supreme Court has not been willing to really implement on such a broad scale in a very long time, and highlights perhaps the weirdness in the way that the Supreme Court is set up. Uh, but yeah, it seems very odd that to me that this political football would actually be released, as it were, and no longer is it a threat of something or a promise of something, but it's something actually done. Um, because now, in the midterm elections, that there will be people on one side of the issue saying, "We got this done for you, so elect me," which isn't a really good sales pitch because you've already accomplished what that side wanted. So why would they need to elect you? They're going to have to create now a boogeyman, which of some sorts, that it would be reinstated somehow. And honestly, the only way it would be reinstated is if Congress and Senate actually got together and made an actual constitutional amendment, which they should have done in the first place. And that's particularly the reason why the Supreme Court is was able to make this ruling in the first place. The other side will promise we need an overwhelming majority. Will say they need an overwhelming majority to reinstate Roe versus Wade, although they really should just call it the 27th Amendment or whatever number amendment we're at this point. So yeah, weird. Everything's weird, and, and no one can look in the future and really know what's going to happen. But I can fairly accurately predict that people have been angry and will be angry, and will probably be even more angry. Um, and we'll just leave it at that because none of that has anything to do with video games, and I'm sure people just want to come and watch these videos and just get away from that kind of non-video game related stressors and elements. It is Friday again, and boy, is it super consistent that every single Friday there is network trouble. Um, super consistent. AT&T is a terrible internet service provider, and I kind of knew it too. Like, but I figured I would give it a try. But boy, did that not work. I don't care about speeds when you have just poor experiment in production procedures that have every Friday end up being a terrible experience as far as the frame pacing and the network frame pacing. We got a decent amount of daily quests I need to do, and then we need 3 more victories in the festival, which lasts 2 more days, and it is real questionable whether I'm gonna get it all done. Here's another survey, but it doesn't promise any gems or crystals, so I wouldn't bother doing it. They seem to be a little too obsessed with surveys in general, and I tried to play a little bit off screen, obviously, so we can receive some more of the dual pass. And let's see. Let's go back to this one because I think this is the one that actually wins. And Duel. For the actual accountability section, the heat is still a big issue, certainly, and I'm just not getting a lot done ever, and falling further and further behind. I recorded 2 hours of Mist 4 and didn't record the audio, so then I went back and recorded another 2-hour episode of Mist 4. Hopefully this time I did get the audio. I haven't checked it. I spent a few hours tweaking the YouTube Shorts OBS scene and macro that I made to make these YouTube Shorts, which so far so bad. Like they're not getting sending out notifications on the YouTube Shorts, which I feel like that probably highlights where YouTube isn't actually trying to make YouTube Shorts succeed, even though they're pretending like they are. What they want is they want to steal the Instagram crowd and then convert them from doing YouTube Shorts and watching YouTube Shorts into watching longer term videos. The algorithm, and by extension the desires of YouTube, has always been to keep people watching YouTube as long as possible. Maybe they kind of would prefer if you watch 10-minute videos, so there's more commercials in between each video, versus watching 1 2-hour video that would have maybe even the same amount of commercials, but they would be in the middle, where it's more interrupting. But there's really no ads playing in front of YouTube Shorts, so they're not getting any money from them, and they're not pushing them and notifying them. So I don't know how you make a business process around that. I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube Shorts is like the hundreds of other YouTube Google projects that just get abandoned. But I'll give it a try. Like, this is low effort to get into it. Ideally, obviously, in any new endeavor, you would want it to succeed like crazy. I would have wanted that first YouTube short to have gotten 50, 60 views minimum in the first couple hours. There definitely are some people that are succeeding there, but not, I don't think, a lot. I think it's the best of the best if the shorts get lots of views, and then they only last a few hours in the first place. So like the first YouTube short I put out now almost certainly would never be recommended by any algorithm ever again. So it's tissue paper level of content, whereas ideally my video around like Lego Batman, I think that gets fairly high views month after month after month, as far as potential passive views, which if I ever get monetized again would be potential passive income. So so there is almost certainly a better reasoning to make pre-recorded footage than YouTube Shorts. If it took the same amount of time, definitely make pre-recorded footage. See if we can now summon something. $1,000. $3,000. Yeah, I think you go 3,000. I didn't really plan on doing that, but whatever. And see, if we were to try and special summon something here, that would be weaker. Tribute this card, special summon one Dark Dragon machine monster from your hand, except that one. So you tribute that to potentially summon that. I don't think that's worth it. And in the turn. In my second playthrough of the first part of Myst 4, there were several elements that I found that I missed the first time. And Myst 4 kind of does feel like if you're using a walkthrough, it's going to be a game that you can beat fairly quickly. If you're not using a walkthrough, it's going to be much closer to other Myst games that are annoyingly confusing and potentially long because you're just going to wander around trying to find the answers. A reboot, a remake of Myst would almost certainly have instructions in the top left screen telling you exactly what you need to do in general, which would make for an easier game, that would make for a more accessible game for many players. Let's see what we can do here. See if this does something. I don't think this is going to. Stole my card, I think. Is what happened here. Yeah, my only hope would be that I could special summon this. Do that. And yeah, I've already gone quiet. There really isn't a lot to say about Mist 4. Other than, like, it is kind of nice that there is a feature with the magic necklace that reads the books. That I really wish they kind of started that way. I really wish the first section started with a small you're trapped in a room tutorial experience, just to kind of learn how the game is going to play and make everything a little bit smaller to start with. But yeah, you definitely see most games that would be somewhat like Myst nowadays are something closer to a 100 rooms type game where you are in a small room and there's very little in the room to pick up or interact with and look at, where Myst is entire worlds that have been just overly decorated with Myst 4 in particular. It's overly decorated with books, so you see books all over the place in that first area, and yet you can't open any books other than very special ones, and you can't read anything special otherwise. It's hardly like Skyrim where you just find books around and read them all the time, which a new Myst series almost certainly should be more like that. And there should be more humans around. Like, there should be book traders and thieves and people that will just break into your place and steal your linking books or just steal books in general. Books should be a like precious commodity in the world, and while puzzle gameplay should be the focus, it wouldn't be crazy if you have to sneak into a dungeon in some age in a Myst reboot and escape with your life for a book that is hidden in a treasure chest at the end of that dungeon, a la something like Indiana Jones. I don't know if that really means there should be a shooting mechanic, probably not, or if there should be heavy actions, but something like a wall climbing Assassin's Creed Tomb Raider game. But a few little mazes probably wouldn't be terrible. You probably want the feeling of utter safety, or mostly safety. You probably shouldn't have a health bar. You probably shouldn't have to regain stamina or health or anything like that in a Myst reboot, but you could certainly see some spooky things happening in different ages, which would effectively be different mazes or dungeons to collect books. I think a Myst reboot probably would work very nicely if it was set 100 to 1,000 years in the future, and still loosely connected to the old Myst world, but also was severely different. You don't have to really talk about the people of Dunny that much. There should probably be something that reads every book out loud, even if it is just a text-to-speech engine and it's just a computerized voice. You should have some kind of book scanner that can scan the books and probably bring the books and make them linking books. You could probably halfway through a missed reboot say, right now the scanner can scan the books and you can read them, but it can't actually link to them because of the magic not really working that way. And then halfway through the game, you could potentially say, at this point, the whole world opens up, and you can digitally jump from one place to one place, from any place to any place. They kind of did that in Uru, but they kind of didn't. They overly complicated it in Uru because in Uru you had a linking cloth that could take you to your own personal private island, and from that personal private island you could then link to a electronic chamber that, if you had a bracelet encoding locked in, location locked in, it would then unlock a linking book to link to you. So it was like a three-way process to go anywhere, which is too much. Yep. And I'm probably making a mistake making 2-hour episodes around Myst 4, but it's probably not a bad idea either. Like, inherently on my channel, it's always been a case where 10-minute episodes are what the algorithm wants, but 10-minute gameplay sessions is not realistic at all to what the reality of the situation is as far as how people play games. Even little kids that have screen time are not going to get into a game for 10 minutes and then leave. 10 minutes only makes sense if you're effectively playing a micro game. Like, even then, that's not quite how long you should play. So the Steam Summer Sale is happening. I don't think I'm gonna really buy any video games because, like, I've just been so far behind. Probably should, but we will want to kind of look at it, so that's going to make this stream a little bit longer anyway, so we need to hurry. Video Games Chronicles has a article here that says Xbox has outsold PlayStation again in Japan last week as the stock shortages continue. The Xbox Series X and S sales were more than double that of the PlayStation 5, which, yeah, 6,000 units were sold between the Series X and Series S, over 6,000, whereas only 2,000 units or so were sold, maybe even 3,000 if you had the digital only consoles. So yeah, it's odd certainly that a part shortage might be the thing that leads to it might be the thing that leads to a success level of the Xboxes in Japan. Alright, let's see what this does. I think that's a good setup, so we'll just leave it at that. Rocksteady Studios tweeted out, today marks the 7 years since the release of Arkham Knight. which is the, I believe, last game in the Arkham series, the one that failed fairly miserably, so I guess that might explain why the Arkham, the next Batman game, which is not an Arkham game, is not releasing at that same time. You probably wouldn't want to just keep the same release date. I wouldn't be surprised if today was the exact date that Arkham Asylum and Arkham City both were released, or all three of those games were released at the same day. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous to even highlight, though, that that game came out, because no level of news is good news for what effectively is the worst video game, AAA video game, to be released, at least until Cyberpunk 2077. So now it's like potentially the second worst AAA video game, on top of which at least Cyberpunk 2077 has a lot more promise of things being improved and people wanting to go back and play it, whereas Arkham Knight was pretty much abandoned. Our YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki putting out a congratulations to people getting married. I assume these are YouTubers. At a certain point, it kind of doesn't matter. But you can see how Susan Wojcicki is really not putting out much information as far as YouTube. As she's putting out something in Russian, which almost certainly was translated for her. Yeah. It's strange that she doesn't have like daily stats coming out, or just like numbers and political, not political, but statistical, business like posts. Seems so strange that there's just like no desire in her mind at all to actually talk business on any level, with as far as how YouTube is going and how she is actually involved in it. She is oddly the most hands-off, at least by her post. She seems to be the most hands-off CEO I've ever seen. Although probably not. She's probably very much in a large group of CEOs that do very little and just collect a paycheck. So she's destroyed that to bring something back. What happens if I attack a 0 with a 0? Nothing. Okay, good to know. And so I guess the trick here is she's going to try and play a card when there are two 0 attack characters here. So what I'm going to do is come over to main phase 2 and straight up special summon something. So there are no 0s around. And then that should ruin their strategy. GameDeveloper.com had this article, and I wanted to talk about it first. The Epic Games Store apparently will use randomized ratings to curb review bombing. The storefront will also use random points to help with curation and discoverability, which, I mean, inherently from before it's even launched, they're telling you that the numbers are, the points are made up and they don't matter. What's that old saying from Whose Line Is It Anyway? But yeah, they're telling you directly that the numbers will be inaccurate. I don't see any way how this this isn't going to work in a inaccurate way. The Epic Games Store will ask random players who've played the game for at least 2 hours to rate the experience on a 5-point scale. Epic believes that randomizing the process will prevent Epic Games Store users from piling on specific titles to artificially lower or perhaps even inflate. Yeah, notice how GameDeveloper.com is only speculating on the fact that some games are artificially inflated. Players will be selected at random following a play session to score a game up to 5 stars. Over time, these scores will populate the title's overall rating. So the score points aren't random, it's just who's being asked is random. Which, if you are randomly chosen at the end of each play session, even if you have to play for 2 hours in that specific play session, which in itself would be a self-selecting group of people who would put higher recommendations, like people who play the game for 5 minutes and are bored or hate it or just can't get it to run, if they are never included in the pool of random people who can review the game, that's manipulating the data. This is definitely lying with statistics or lying with numbers, the way the system seems to work. But let's say for a second that it doesn't require you to actually play 2 hours in every play session, which is probably more the way it's going to work. Then you play the game for 2 hours, then you play it for 5 minutes, then you leave, then you play it for 5 minutes, then you leave, then you play it for 5 minutes, then you leave. You just keep doing that over and over again. Eventually you will increase your odds high enough that you will be asked to review the game. So I could see people making macros very quickly, and 5 minutes is just an arbitrary number. They may just start a play session, leave, start a play session, leave, just as fast as possible until that pop-up comes, and it's just jumping through hoops to for people who would be mad / irate at a game enough that they really feel that the game should be negatively reviewed. It's not like it's super easy even on Steam to review a game negatively. It's fairly easy. Certainly you can go give it 0 stars, but if you're not writing any actual text there, or if you're just copying and pasting text there, those reviews stand out to anybody who actually reads the reviews. And I'm sure Valve is working on some anti-spam process to prevent illegitimate review bombing, but almost all review bombing is fairly legitimate review bombing. I heard a conspiracy theory, and I can only really describe it as a conspiracy theory at the moment, around a company called BlackRock that is an investment company that apparently actually invests in a lot of things and has kind of a Chinese-like social credit score. And like, I really need to research it and not just listen to one YouTuber, and same goes true for what I'm saying here. But there is, if this conspiracy theory, which is all I can really call it, is true, this BlackRock investment group is giving social credit scores to companies, and people are listening to these social credit score, particularly since they have a system called Aladdin that recommends whether or not to buy or sell stocks. and that social credit score, as it were. I'm being a little bit brief, just describing it as a social credit score, but that's basically what it is. It certainly would explain why so many companies go out of their way to look woke or look like they're doing something good for society. On the other hand, I almost agree with the idea of not having people or recommending people invest in companies that are just like private military contractors or oil companies that are spilling oil into the middle of the ocean. So I kind of agree to that idea too. So I guess I'm very much sitting on the fence on that one, but yeah, I definitely should. I don't care enough to really do the research I should, but certainly would explain a lot. What does that have anything to do with? Why does that have anything to do with the Epic Games Store and only letting some people speak? Nothing. So I just kind of rambled there. To get back to the Epic Games Store, basically only letting a random small selection of players review games or rate games. It is reviewing or rating. It may not be reviewing at all, it may be rating. Suffice to say, though, when you have a self-selecting group of people who have played the game for more than 2 hours, and then you're randomly saying, you're saying only a percentage randomly of those people are going to be able to get a rating, you are limiting the free speech. Not, and when I say free speech, I don't mean just free speech in the US Constitution. I mean the general, almost religious belief in free speech that precedes the establishment of the United States Constitution, that precedes the ideas and ideals of most societies. Like everyone being able to have their say, and their say being equal, equally worthless, but equal nonetheless, is kind of a foundation on the concept of free speech. And it is something that you probably need to have if you're going to trust a review or rating system on the Epic Games Store. Although, in all fairness, the Epic Games Store has been blatantly obvious and apparent and upfront around the idea that they do not care about the consumers of video games anywhere as much as they care about the developers and publishers of games. And as such, they have said that they are going to bend over backwards to make the publishers and developers happy, and they're going to try not to have anything that would inform a consumer about a bad product. And they originally were saying, certainly, that they weren't going to have reviews at all. And now they are trying to add features to the Epic Games Store to make the Epic Games Store seem like something that really could compete with Steam. But they're trying to do it in a very limited fashion. It is the pretense of reviews. It is like the Metacritic of reviews, where only the big video game critics reviews get put together in the professional score, and then the individual actual gamer score is separated into a different category that's they try to de-emphasize. And anybody who would consider themselves a video game critic but is not big enough according to Metacritic still doesn't really get counted on the same level. Certainly isn't a democratic process. On the chat, we have Bizarre Reco Kraus, who says 30-second delay. Why? Most streamers have some level of delay. That's really not that weird. in my opinion. Why do I have a 30-second delay? It gives me time, certainly, to respond to things, and it buys maybe some time as far as people trying to spam. I don't know if I've even really thought about it too much, but I certainly wouldn't just be immediately convinced to get rid of the 30-second delay. It probably, when I set it up, probably was more because I was showing the chat on the stream, which I have since changed the way. I've changed the game I was playing, and this Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel really doesn't have enough room to have the chat on the screen. Plus, I've never really had consistent numbers of people on the chat talking to each other or me to justify putting the chat on the screen. Because as soon as you put the chat on the screen, you have to put the chat rules on the screen. I've actually been able to, by removing the chat from the screen, I've been able to remove the chat rules. Which I very loosely enforce now and just tell people about when it comes up, instead of having to have a bunch of chat rules. At one point, there was definitely some people that were just jumping on to either troll or annoy me, or just they were young and they were like asking me to play them all the time when I really didn't have time to play them and do the dailies. Or they were asking me to play different games, and it was just like, no, I'm playing this game. I'm not going to jump to a different game just because one person wants me to. But yeah, the biggest reason I would say right now, as far as the 30-second delay, is just network problems. When there is a small hiccup in my network, which usually it's not small hiccups, it's usually my ISP just being really bad for an hour straight. Like right now, the 65% of the frames are being dropped. That's pretty bad. I don't know why I'm activating this, but whatever. So yeah, network issue is probably the real reason at this point that there's a 30-second delay. There's really just no reason to change it. I haven't found it to be incredibly annoying, nor have I found people really complaining about it that much. I tend to be fairly delayed even on top of the 30-second delay as far as when I actually get around to speaking to people or responding to people. We also have a Norfolk rule, or Norfolk rule, who just says hello on the chat. Hello. See, it would be interesting to find out certainly if this stream is getting promoted more because of the 2 YouTube shorts that I've put out. Like, and you'd probably never be able to prove a connection there, but that would be interesting if the algorithm just promotes people that plays with their new systems. It's not video game related, but at some point Twitter put out this notice, which they're probably in some settlement was required to put this out. They used phone numbers and emails to deliver tailored advertising to you, and they make it like it's actually a good thing that they're not doing that anymore. And see, this was like 2019, so this is definitely settlement things. They apologize very much at the bottom. We're very sorry this happened, which is almost certainly they were legally required to put in that phrase. But yeah, Twitter used your personal data, like almost every company does, to make custom ads to you and personalize custom ads to you. No big surprise there, but figure I'd mention it. Second Dinner is looking for another senior producer. They're all working on Marvel Snap, I have to assume, as far as the first big Marvel mobile phone collectible card game and first big project from Second Dinner, founder Ben Brode. My feeling as far as Marvel Snap being the game that they're working on, it hasn't been any better or gotten any worse. It's just I really was unimpressed by I was just really unimpressed by the number of the quality of Marvel Snap and the focus on it being a very fast-paced mobile card game. And so I probably will try it when it comes out, but I'm definitely in a different opinion than what I thought I would be in as far as jumping over to it when it actually does come out. I think now I am going to just stick with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which is working fine, although these festivals and the gameplay in general goes crazy and takes forever. You see how long it is just for some people to play. And everybody complains about slow play, but also everybody is slow playing themselves, just because it really has more to do with the network connectivity and the way it's programmed. And some of this stuff probably should just be asynchronous. If you could program some of these functions to be a little bit more asynchronous. That way one player can play and do a bunch of actions, or lock in a bunch of actions quickly and then only have to react if something changes. And I guess I'm still following American McGee to see if Spicy Horse's other game, Grimm, gets put back on Steam. It seems like he hasn't tweeted that it has, so oddly that game does seem to just be down for the count and down potentially forever. Definitely some weirdness there. They are still very much promoting their little stuffed animal monstrosities at Spicy Horse, and that is seemingly the only thing they're actually doing. Okay. Yeah, it's probably safest here to do this. Put this on the field. If they don't attack, I can target this and do damage. If I were to have attacked this instead, it would have lowered something down to 0, and that would have been the only thing I could have attacked. So, just in the face here. Now they have to attack, and unless they destroy the Mirror Force first, I'll activate Mirror Force, which odds are low he'll be able to destroy Mirror Force with one card. So either he doesn't attack and he loses, or he does attack and he loses. Meanwhile, while he's trying to decide what he's doing, we'll go through the Video Games Chronicle articles. Xenoblade Chronicles 3's $30 expansion pass will include story content. I think we had already talked about that. See, Amazon Prime members can now claim 25 quote free indie games. They're being offered to subscribers ahead of the July's Prime Day shopping event. Prime Day, the 12th and the 13th. Let's look at the actual games, because most of them I imagine are not super interesting. Yeah. No names there really jumping out. Prime Day being 2 days. It is going to be interesting, certainly, as to what sales are to be had with all the inflation and increased cost of things, and how many people are really going to engage with that. Takes way too long to actually have a victory here. And certainly that's why I'm not getting anywhere with this festival. Some of the previous festivals have been somewhat easier, but they've decided to throw us 2 fairly difficult festivals. Let's see. If we get up to 1100, that's when we stop getting gems and just start getting the legacy packs, which aren't even really worth that much. You only get 2 cards per legacy pack, and then you're just working for this title, which you're going to potentially get a title from every festival you get all the way to the end with. So those titles also aren't really going to be worth much. The festivals happen too often. If there was like a grand championship title that you could earn through some annual festival that was more of a high ranked thing and required actual skill, that would be something that you'd potentially put in your titles. But to say you were at the top tier of one specific festival when you can only highlight 4 titles in the first place is not really worth your time. Not worth it to earn the title, not worth it to present that title as if it's a big deal. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says the Summer Games Fest says it has attracted a record number of viewers, including 3.5 million peak concurrent global viewers. Which, okay. The Summer Games Fest was live June 9th, not to be confused with the Next Fest, which was just an online Steam presentation. Let's see, let's just go ahead and cancel the first move. Hyenas is Sega's new multiplayer shooter. There is a debut trailer. Seems like it is a collection of fairly weird looking characters, but that's not too different from, say, something like Overwatch. If anything, it may be a case where this was an attempt at making an Overwatch game, and it's just taken them this incredibly long to make an Overwatch game. This definitely does feel like it is trying to be a little bit more in your face and sexualized with these characters. There seems to be quite a lot of cheesecake female characters in female outfits. It definitely kind of feels like a Saints Row field is trying to be engaged with too. If the elevator pitch here was Overwatch, the second part of that pitch would have been Overwatch but edgy. It also seems to be very much focused in a zero gravity environment. should have played this. I can still play this. A lot of it certainly will come down to the idea of just how much do you trust Sega as to make any game that's successful. In a lot of ways, Hyenas does kind of feel like it's getting to some of the like Crazy Taxi type Sega games that came out in the Dreamcast era. The trying to be a bit more edgy, trying to target teenagers. I don't know if edgy teenagers even really exist nowadays. Definitely, I think they're going to try and push the idea that Hyenas is for more mature kids, where Overwatch is for little kids, even if that isn't actually anywhere close to being true. But you really have to, you really would have to just hope that Sega can get the details right to make a game like that make sense. It feels like you would have to add a fairly consistent stream of updates as far as levels. It feels like there aren't that many characters, and so you potentially want to add more characters, unless this is really just going to be a $30 game that is multiplayer, but it's a one and done. There is definitely room for loot boxes in any game. We didn't see any evidence of that, but they did talk about stealing merch, and so stealing merch will probably lead to some kind of currency, and whether that is solely an in-game currency or microtransaction currency, we'll have to see. The problem too with some game like this, though, is we may just not nobody may be very interested in that type of game in 2022, where if that had come out in 1995, probably would have sold fairly well. Let's see, moving on. Video Games Chronicle says PlayStation's mid-year deal sale has discounts over 650 products. You can get up to 75% off selected PlayStation games and DLC for 2 weeks. What's interesting here is up to 75% off, particularly in the middle of inflation, is a terrible maximum discount. Particularly when you think about how Steam sales allow for some games to go to free or 99% off. There is a real lack of connection there. Like, in all fairness, most 99% off games, most 90% off games on Steam are at best indie games from that you've never heard of. At worst, they're garbage games that you shouldn't buy even if they were free. But it at the very least lets you put 90% off or 99% off on the storefront of Steam and say the prices could be this much discounted, which is something they would do in a real world storefront. If there were two stores in a mall, and you walked by one and it says sale up to 75% off, and then you look at the other store and it says sale up to 90% off, obviously you're going to go look at the up to 90% off store at least first. So PlayStation's not really competing. I'm a little surprised that Steam and Xbox, and particularly Xbox, doesn't have a system where the second something Let's see. We need a dark monster that was special summoned from the extra deck. Let's try this. So we'll destroy that one and that one. Then we'll activate this effect. And then we'll special summon this, I guess. Well, that worked out pretty well. Yeah, anyways, what I was saying was, I'm a little surprised that Microsoft particularly doesn't just have a budget to say, the second a sale is announced, let's just match the prices on that are listed as far as the discount, and just take potentially a loss in sales. I'm a little surprised that it doesn't go down that direction, because you could potentially do that and do price matching easily. Moving on, we have a Video Games Chronicle article. It says Vanguard and Warzone Season 4 patch notes released as new content launches. So if you want to read the patch notes, they're available at Video Games Chronicle. Spire is working, offers a workaround for the game-breaking Star Wars Knight of the Old Republic 2 Switch bug. Bug on the Switch. Players can bypass the bug using the cheats menu, which they tend not to like to admit that there's a cheats menu in games, when almost certainly every game does have a cheats menu that's not hacked or patched out in any way. Classic PlayStation 1 games on PlayStation Plus are at 50 Hz in Europe, but Sony says 60 Hz is coming. A lot of the games that would have been classic PlayStation 1 games very possibly run a little bit better at 50 Hz than they do 60 Hz. You just don't know. It is certainly the battle days when half of the PS1 titles are the PAL versions instead of the NTSC versions. But yeah, this has been a thing as far as emulation for a long time, is that you kind of want to consider whether you want the TSC 60 Hz version or the PAL 50 Hz version. Although, if you really don't care that much, it's fairly easy just to say get the NTSC 60 Hz version, because there is a fairly large difference between what it feels like to play 50 Hz versus 60 Hz. Just summoning things. It certainly would be crazy if I still somehow lose here, but we shall see. Let's see if this works. I really have not learned these cards. And that's the thing the festival should be doing more than anything, is it should be teaching me how these cards work. And it isn't. Because I just don't have time to learn the cards and play the festival and try and get victories and do all of the rewards. Moving on, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie closes on Uncharted as it tops $400 million at the box office. It's currently the 5th highest grossing video game adaptation of all time. It's probably a bigger issue than it would seem, just because this is a CGI game with live action humans in it, whereas Uncharted was just all live action humans, which is probably a little bit more palatable to people who just want to see random movies. So yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog movies surprisingly successful, and yet the new Sonic game not really being influenced by it at all. They've said. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle has the PlayStation Plus UK games list. Here's every classic game added in Europe. The full list of PS1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and PSP games at launch. Which that's going to certainly be a fairly long list of games. Although maybe not as long as you might think. One of the things, they've separated it for the streaming service too. One of the things to certainly consider is just one of the things to consider is just how much you feel like there would be a lot more games of note in the past, but really it wasn't. Like, we have gone slowly but surely from getting one game of note every quarter. There would really be only 3 or 4 games every year in the NES era worth actually playing. They've broken this down quite a bit. Apparently there's only one PSP game in it all on the premium tier. But yeah, the numbers are fairly small, though, as far as when you start to get into older series of games and previous generations of games, as far as what really is worth playing. And the PlayStation 2 had tons and tons of games, but it's really questionable how many of them actually are worth playing now, and they all probably look pretty old and pretty dated. Moving on, a Destiny YouTuber who allegedly impersonated Bungie is being sued by the studio for $7.7 million. So, Bungie was able to, as I understand it, find who the person was that put out a bunch of bogus DMCA strikes on YouTube, pretending to be Bungie, irritating Destiny 2 streamers. Apparently, the claim is that he was a caught cheater on Destiny 2 who was putting up music from Destiny 2, and they took him down. They took him down or copyright struck him. Apparently he had 23 infractions on YouTube before his channel was finally shut down in the inciting incident. So 23 strikes or 23 fractions does seem to be a number as far as before YouTube actually will do anything. But so yeah, he got his channel taken down. Then he started impersonating Bungie and taking other people's channels down in a way to try and this is all allegedly, in a way to try and make it look like Bungie was just taking everybody's down unfairly, including his. But also, it seems like he was bragging about it on Discord, and the plan isn't a terrible plan to do a false flag operation effectively and claim yourself to be a victim. But it does certainly scream of the logic of somebody who is not completely connected to reality. Somebody who thinks they'll just be believed no matter what is said and no matter what evidence shows to the contrary. Which frankly, I think there's just a lot of people out there like that who do just kind of believe that they can talk their way out of anything, and those are the people that tend to get convicted. At the end of the day, this is something that affected a very small number of YouTubers, and it affected Bungie. Bungie is going to claim that it affected them for the amounts of millions of dollars, which is bull, almost certainly. But they're going to try to be as punishing and as crazy. And they may very well go for the same thing that Nintendo somehow succeeded at, to have this person literally thrown in jail and held in prison for what is effectively just copyright infringement, which should be a civil case, not a criminal case. Which that definitely highlights the problems with lobbyists being able to pass criminal statutes around things that should be civil. There's definitely a lot of lobbyists and push to say that making a digital copy is the same as physically stealing property, and it just isn't. And those factors should be considered. Let's see. Meanwhile, I would say the bigger issues around Destiny 2 definitely more centered around Destiny 2 really just being mid, for lack of a better term, just mediocre, having microtransactions in it, and just not being a solid experience. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says footage of the cancelled Scarface 2 game have been shared online. Scarface Empire was scrapped when the developer Radical was acquired by Activision. Seems like a lot of information is getting leaked, probably because a lot of people are leaving the business or feel like Activision Blizzard is going to be acquired, so they aren't living in fear for their jobs. Which at a certain point, it almost makes an argument that being aggressive and threatening and being a jerk as a boss might be necessary if the second you stop being a jerk as a boss, leaks start happening. Particularly in the game industry, more than most, or pretty much any other industry, you don't see authors going, here's our 10-page synopsis of this book that was canceled or that never got funded. You don't see movies going, here's our 200-page script that was never picked up for a movie. You don't see those kinds of leaks for TV shows, movies, books, anything like that. Probably because while it's crazy to say that anything is good in the Hollywood system of doing things. The Hollywood system of doing things, I think, does kind of allow for the idea of if somebody has a concept, that concept could be pitched somewhere else. The right of first refusal that a publisher might have is about is how Hollywood would really do things, whereas video game publishers seem to be able to just kill things dead and permanently. A lot of that may have to do with licensing agreements and rights, and so it becomes very complicated very fast. But yeah, I could definitely see situations where the where a publisher just passes on a game and then another publisher could pick it up. There may just not be that many publishers looking to publish games in the game industry, instead of building them in-house with companies that they own, and that might be the problem. It's a pretty complicated issue. I'm not sure I really even have a suggestion there. Perhaps it's more of a case that developers should get the rights to games. For instance, if the developer here, Radical, I mean, I guess they did have the rights to Scarface, and they were just acquired. If anything, I guess this is more of a story of just acquisitions killing video games. Of course, the problem here is, notice how they call this Scarface 2 game. So there was a Scarface 1 game. Nobody remembers a Scarface 1 game. That's so it's not like that series succeeded. Scarface, the original Scarface game, was an action-adventure game released for the PS2, Xbox, Wii, and PC in 2006. I would have sworn yesterday that there's never been a Scarface game, that would have been an untouchable license. They wouldn't have let them do that. Moving on, Blizzard explains what will happen to Overwatch loot boxes and currencies when the sequel launches. Overwatch 2 will replace the current live service in October. As I understood it, the currency will transition, but loot boxes, I guess, either need to be let's see. Overwatch 2 will launch as a free-to-play title. It will include a new seasonal structure featuring battle passes, and unlike the original game, it won't include loot boxes. So almost certainly you're going to have to just be forced to open any unopened loot boxes, if you have unopened loot boxes. And then whatever you get in those loot boxes will either be converted to a currency or and then transferred over, or you're just going to lose it completely, which I doubt that that's going to be the case, because that would be too negative. I can't help but wonder if a lot of the cosmetic items in Overwatch 1 try to become non-existent. They try to get rid of those kinds of items in favor of just not having to download so much and not having to support so much. It would almost make sense if they said the reason they're going to Overwatch 2 is because they're going to a higher resolution or a better technology or something that would lead towards the old cosmetics not looking as good, and thus it's not supported that way. Inherently, this is the problem with any live service game, though, is that they're selling you garbage, and it might be very pretty garbage. When I played the lewd mobile game, which I have to mention at every stream apparently, Destiny Child, when I'm playing Destiny Child, what they're selling is skins of the anime 3D waifu characters. and it is just like worthless visual garbage, and you know it's worthless visual garbage. Uh, but as those series and those types of games get long in the tooth, there's just more to download and more to download and more to download. A single update is hundreds of megabytes for Destiny Child on a cell phone. It's kind of crazy. And yeah, none of it really does much as far as changing stats. And I imagine at least half of everything you get in a loot box in Overwatch 1 is just changing visuals and not changing stats. And maybe they want a tighter, better controlled game, and maybe they want to get away from things that might change the stats. Here we have Video Games Chronicle saying Michael Jackson did compose Sonic 3 music. Yuji Naka has seemingly finally confirmed. Sega has long danced around the question and has never confirmed Jackson's environment. It seems fairly late to the party, though, to say he did after not including the tracks that were suspected to be made by Michael Jackson in Sonic 3. So they took the music out, which effectively, I guess, confirms the suspicion, or you could twist it around to think that it's twisted around. But I'm not sure this article is actually being that truthful, though. Okay, here's the actual quote, and this is where you get the real facts. Oh my god, and this would be translated from Japanese, I'm sure. The music for Sonic 3 has changed, even though Sega official uses Michael Jackson's music, end quote, Naka said. So he was one of the programmers for Sonic 3. He may not even know whether Michael Jackson was involved, but it does seem like that is a direct confirmation from him, or claim from him, that Michael Jackson did make the music on Sonic 3 and they took it out in Sonic Origins. It feels like it would make more sense, certainly, to simply try and credit him, apologize for not crediting him in the past, and just keep the same music. Like, you still are having the controversy. Norfolk Rule on the chat says, what deck am I playing? I'm playing this Benevolent Force to be reckoned with deck, loner deck, which has all these cards that you can check yourself. I don't particularly understand it well. In this Festival 1 festival where you can only have one card anyways, it's not really a very synergistic deck that I like by any means. It's just the one that seemingly kind of makes sense. I would be playing my deck, but then it would be a nightmare to try and convert any deck that I would be playing over to a Festival 1 approved deck where there's only one copy of a card. Yeah, this Limit 1 festival is by far the worst festival we've had so far. Yeah, it is very weird. You're still bringing up the name of Michael Jackson and all the controversy that is around the name of Michael Jackson by removing the music, so you might as well have just said, we have agreed to, it would have been better for them to say, hey, we're going to credit him, and we are going to give some proceeds to his children. I don't think there's anybody that would really begrudge the Michael Jackson estate or his children particularly getting money. There's been no big controversy or anything that has been super big around Michael Jackson's children, or them trying to be in the limelight or in the spotlight at all. If anything, I think the Michael Jackson estate has kind of failed to try to push his music and get it back on the radio effectively, from all the people that said they would never play his music again. And I guess inherently that's what Sega's also saying, is that they will just never play Michael Jackson music again, despite the fact that he's been dead for years. Like, I feel like in comparison to Michael Jackson, it's kind of impossible to compare all of the accusations against Michael Jackson. I think pretty much none of which were ever proven. It was undenied that Elvis married his 15-year-old cousin. Like, in fact, that was fairly common in those days, to marry a very young cousin. But yeah, Elvis was like, I think somewhere around 25, 28, and he married his 15-year-old cousin, and nobody batted an eye about it. It was no big controversy. Even if it was a controversy then, it certainly isn't a controversy now. Nobody is going to stop playing Elvis music over it. And Elvis is not alone. Pretty much all musicians live that drug and rock and roll lifestyle and do crazy, unacceptable things in most people's eyes. So people just forget about the crazy events and the crazy encounters and separate the art from the artist. And almost certainly they will eventually get around to doing that with Michael Jackson's discography too. Nor said, I see you were playing the loner deck after the fact. Let's see. Moving on to video games news, because we're getting into rants. No Man's Sky on Switch has been delayed until October, which, good, delay it. Make sure it actually runs on the Switch well. Next week's free Epic Games Store titles have been announced. It's Gene Force 1, Mutagen, and Eratus Lord of the Dead. Neither of which are games I recognize. It feels like the Epic Store, as far as their free games, they kind of go up and down. In the sense that sometimes they're rather very good games that they're giving away, and then sometimes they're games that nobody has heard about. I imagine the Epic Games Store is struggling at some level to find deals and have games that they can offer for free. And we haven't seen any numbers that really make it seem like this strategy is continuing to succeed as far as getting new players and a new player base. Like, if the Epic Games Store was really succeeding, you would expect every quarter for them to come out and say that it's growing at a really remarkable rate. And I just don't think it is. Should have destroyed that earlier, so then I could have summoned this. So I could have attacked and done another 2,000 damage. It would be not worth it to special summon something. almost done with the Video Games Chronicle articles. Let's see. Last of Us and Days Gone veterans announce a new studio and an NFT game called Ashfall. Michael Mumbauer and John Garvin are making a game for PC, consoles, and Web 3.0. I saw an article saying we need to end the phrases web number point number because it's getting ridiculous and doesn't mean anything. This again is one of those cases where it's two people pretending like they had all the involvement or most of the involvement in making two games, Last of Us and Days Gone, where they probably had just some involvement, and the amount of that involvement could be fairly high or could be fairly low. And then they're going off to make their own studio, which is fine, and I would like to see more studios and more variety in games because there's more studios. But then immediately they're looking for activist investors or investors, so they're immediately then also kowtowing to ridiculous investment trends like NFTs, which there's no way at this point, in my opinion, anybody is going to be able to release anything with an NFT in it and people enjoy it or like it. It seems like it's something they're going to try and shove down in our throats, and I'm not even sure that's worked. When's the last time something has been shoved down our throats as gamers and we've actively put up with it and not complained quite a bit and boycotted at least a decent amount? Like, sure, microtransactions we all hated, DLC we all hated. I guess that is probably two evidences. Maybe the NFT people are right. Maybe gamers are just a bunch of idiot sheep and they can have anti-consumer policies shoved down their throat and they will just roll over and take it. I mean, at a certain point, maybe we've taken enough and we will have that real frustration there, but yeah. Although I would say with NFTs, I think even the investors are going to start rolling their eyes at phrases like NFTs and stop actively supporting or investing in companies that have business plans that are only around the concept of NFTs. Let's see, moving on, A Plague Tale Requiem gets an October release date and a 10 minutes of new gameplay. This kid has scar on his face, and this lady has blood on her face. Never really got around to playing A Plague Tale. You look at this limited edition here, and it feels like it is way more action-based than I feel like the first game was. I really feel like the actual gameplay in the original Plague Tale was more just kind of a light-based. Interesting, the smaller kid is pushing the older sister on a swing. Yeah, I feel like the first game was more of a light-based escape game, kind of almost like a horror game. A lot of walking around, kind of like what we're seeing here. Less running and kicking, and see, these are almost certainly QuickTime events that will happen, and I can't help but assume that this is possibly the beginning of the game. Yeah, and here we're seeing a whole stealth gameplay mechanic. Unless this is exactly what the game was before, she just like Assassin's Creed Gauntlet stabbed that guy. It seems like they are drastically changing how the game actually plays, and you can control these plague rats, but it doesn't seem like you're going to use them that often even. I need to play here or I'm going to fail. Hmm. It would be an interesting comparison if we played the first game and it is just like a really different experience. Special summon another one from my hand. Hmm. Yeah. Either Plague Tale Requiem as a sequel. Let's see if this prevents it from getting mirror forced. Nope, that didn't work. Honestly, though, I would say that it's probably not a terrible idea if some games do kind of start off as small, more indie experiences in the first game, and then if they catch people with the story and catch them with the interest, maybe then you improve the gameplay a little bit to make it actually feel more like a video game and less like a Telltale story. Of course, the constant iterations, the constant improvements and fiddling with Assassin's Creed led to many a bad Assassin's Creed game and many a completely different type of game with Assassin's Creed Origins and onward, where it became just straight up an RPG that really doesn't care about story at all. Is it wise to have done this? We shall see. Probably not. Had I not activated that trap, I could have just taken control of the character. But whatever, we'll move forward. Can't do anything with that at the moment. It would be really nice if Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel had just an attack then in turn button. Just attack with all in turn. I'm not going to do anything or activate anything anyways. It should be able to kind of look ahead and see that this is a normal spell card. And so if there are no quick play cards, if there are no spell set trap cards, it should just be able to know that there really isn't much, if anything, you could do. Moving on, Ukraine war has delayed the recent Final Fantasy XVI trailer, claims the producer. Sony Interactive Entertainment was allegedly also worried about the trailer's content in relation to the war, which I'm sure everybody is somewhat worried about that, but it's probably not that important. Like, it's not really anything depicted here. It is not really what Ukrainians dress like or look like in modern times, or Russians look like or dress like. It's not set in that region even on Earth. They're riding chocobos to fight each other with swords and all of that. So, I mean, there's basically nothing here to be concerned with. So, if anything, we may be seeing the beginning of excuses showing up from game developers, and maybe even Japanese game developers in particular, who are just going to try and excuse every delay that they have habitually had, because game developers in Japan in particular are habitually delaying games. So maybe they are just now straight up deciding that they're going to yeah, maybe they are just deciding that they are going to use that as an excuse. This card, and then this card. And that didn't work. Alright, well. Oops. I did not know that could double the amount. Ooh, that is a whole strategy, isn't that? See, that's kind of a great example of me just not understanding the cards at all. I did not know it did that. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Square Enix wants to develop story-focused NFTs, but it doesn't plan to make Final Fantasy NFT games anytime soon. Story-focused NFTs, what does that really mean? I mean, I guess it's NFTs that include characters. I mean, NFTs are basically just pictures, unless you're going to try to sell NFTs that are walls of text, and I don't think anybody's buying that. I don't think people are buying NFTs in general. So pictures of main characters, which theoretically you'd have to make massive amounts of different poses and angles of those main characters, or sell duplicate NFTs of the same picture for that to make any sense at all. It would be crazy for one person to own Cloud from like Final Fantasy VII, and that's the only person that has a picture or NFT of Cloud. Let's see. The Nintendo Mario movie in particular seems to be bending over backwards to assure people that that Chris Pratt does a good Mario voice, to the point where I almost wonder if this is Hollywood gossip that's happening here, because people know he actually doesn't sound good, and they are trying to counter Hollywood rumor and gossip by putting out this. But it does really come off as he's protesting too much. Now Chris Pratt himself says his Mario voice is unlike anything you've heard, which is a potentially coded phrase. To say unlike anything you heard is actually a bad thing, because what you would want familiarity, and you would want Mario to sound like Mario. Subtitle here is the Super Mario movie star says his voice has been updated. Yeah. So this may just be straight up damage control at this point, where they are just admitting that, yeah, Chris Pratt does not sound like Mario. This stunt casting, like the stunt casting of Chris Pratt to be the voice actor of Mario is a mistake. More and more, as face actors and people who are in front of the camera are taking jobs away from voice actors, it sucks. it's not a good thing. Because they don't do as good of a job voice acting, and they really should stay in their lane, and that's a nasty phrase to use certainly, but it really should apply. Let's see, moving on. Video Games Chronicles. The Sonic Remaster developer says he's, quote, very unhappy about the state of Sonic Origins. What is in Origins is not what we turned in, said headcanons. Simon Tomley complains. So, I mean, like Sega is announcing the whole new game Hyenas, and their most recent game of note that they released, Sonic Origins, which was just supposed to be a new collection of Sonic games, which they then nastily delisted all the games in Sonic Origins from Steam and other platforms, so you could only buy it as one big bundle of a lesser product in many people's opinion. Maybe I should have activated that spell then. But yeah, Sega is failing to keep people in lines, failing to keep people from speaking out publicly and saying they're unhappy with the release. This is fairly common for Sega, and yet you're supposed to believe that Hyenas is going to be anything different. It's going to be a total poop show, almost certainly. Sega has never cared enough about their video game category or their video game market as much as they cared about just having arcades that ripped people off in Japan. Like, that was their focus. Plus, I think Sega does a lot of other business in Japan that's not video game related at all. But there's just no compassion or care there. Arguably, maybe Nintendo cares too much about protecting its legacy and making Mario games, although recently a lot of garbage Nintendo games have come out too. But yeah, Sega has never really cared about maintaining a legacy or maintaining quality. And that's why Sega, even if its hardware was better as a console, failed to succeed as a competitor to Nintendo. Sega never tried to emulate the seal of approval concept that Nintendo pushed for so long to indicate that their games were good and they were trying to do good but by them. And at a certain level, Sega's not too different from like Valve and Steam and where PC games are. The only difference is there's that abstraction layer where Valve and Steam says, well, we're just selling everything and we're not really making games ourselves at all. And occasionally Valve will come out with something like Half-Life Alyx and people like it, but that doesn't happen enough. So yeah, there is potentially an alternate universe where had Sega stayed in the console market, they would have moved potentially to online connectivity and hard drives faster, and you would have had effectively a PC Steambox type device branded Sega through a storefront a lot earlier. The Sega Dreamcast did have network connectivity and a modem, and I believe that was the first console to have network connectivity and a modem in the West, at least. There was definitely some lesser known things in Japan, and probably some no-name things even in the West. Yeah. We eventually did get to the buyer beware scenario that we are in as far as Steam games and PC games, but it probably would have happened faster if Sega had stayed in the console market. And maybe that's a bad thing, maybe that's a good thing. It would have been better for Sega though. Let's activate this effect and see if we can special something better. Nope. I've probably just lost here. Yep. And see, when I'm playing these loners decks, all I'm really doing is just trying to say, hey, let's activate everything and just hope that everything we can activate is a good thing. That's the best chance I think I'm gonna have. Oh man, I'm starting to run. Get a little sleepy, get a little dizzy. Yeah. Probably a little bit more sleepy than dizzy. It's just getting me nowhere fast. Let's see, moving on. Video Games Chronicle says Halo Master Chief's Collection developer is, quote, exploring adding microtransactions. Players may be able to buy the newly renamed Spartan points to skip the grind. Which, if they do that, that is literally them throwing in the towel as far as trying to make the Master Chief Collection something that's good and that's relevant. Halo has long since been the prestige game of Xbox and Microsoft, and now that it has stumbled even a little bit, or arguably it kind of has stumbled since Halo 3, that there really hasn't been a great Halo experience. Seems like they're willing to just abandon it and try and overly monetize it and rip people off who are nostalgic for the Halo series. The Halo TV series is also definitely in that category. You can't help but feel like they are sacrificing the Halo, or they have sacrificed the Halo franchise to make money to then buy Bethesda and Activision Blizzard and Double Fine and several other companies. Which I don't think that's the way that should have gone. Halo should be relevant. Halo is effectively the Mario and the Sonic of Xbox, and needs to be treated more like Mario games and less like Sonic games. Moving on, GameStop is holding another PS5 in-sale store event today. Seems like you really have to find these events if you are going to try and buy a PS5. I talked about in the last stream a YouTuber who got a lot of views making a slim PS5. And I just kind of looked at the picture and saw that he had used like over $250 worth of copper to put it in a copper case. And I just assumed it was actually a passive case. Passive cooler, just making the entire case one giant heat spreader that would allow for that would allow for a lot better cooling, and that would allow it to be smaller, much thinner. It was, in fact, I didn't watch the video, it's actually a lot worse than that. It is such a lie and such a bait and switch. example of just water cooling things and hyper cooling things that really somebody should call it out for being clickbaity and deceptive, because what the picture did not show, on top of the $250 worth of copper, is that the copper was effectively just being a water pump connector, and it was actually liquid cooling going through long tubes towards an extremely large and extremely long radiator with fans on it. They also moved the power supply out of the console and into the extremely not shown long radiator and cooler things, which at a certain level, yes, putting the power supply out of the console would let you make a PlayStation Slim, and that is reasonable, and that would be financially doable. It's not financially doable, though, to put a giant amount of copper so then you could liquid cool all the components, the CPU and the RAM in particular, to then make up for the lack of just open airflow. Like, air is definitely safer than water in the long run to cool. In fact, even the liquid metal on the PlayStation 5 is probably a mistake and shouldn't be there. But yeah, of course you can have better cooling with liquid cooling if you have an infinite amount of money. Also, I think it's worth pointing out that he broke the PlayStation 5 that he worked on at first. Just completely broke it and had to use a completely different one to get it to even boot up and to run. So he failed, a pretty expensive failure, on top of spending so much money there. And the only reason he could have done any of this liquid cooling on a PlayStation 5 is because he's a big YouTuber with a lot of Patreon supporters. No average maker is gonna have that kind of funding and that support. And definitely there was no solution or innovation he did that would have been applicable towards towards what Sony could do to make an actual PlayStation Slim. Like, yeah, sure, put in liquid cooling and it'll run faster, but it would also cost another $100, certainly. What Sony PlayStation will do is they will probably come out with a Slim that is not even that much more slim. That they'll probably just try to lose the funky shape of the PlayStation 5 and make it a more square box, funky square box type PlayStation 5. Like when you look at the PlayStation 3 original, it's this big rounded corner, this big rounded corner device that looks all fanciful, but eventually the updated PlayStation 3s just became square boxes, and that made it cheaper and easier, and they'll lower the amount of power and move to a higher process. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they're just trying to make 2 or 3 different variants of the PlayStation 5 that use different kinds of computer chips, but inherently the chip shortage, I think, is hurting all manufacturing everywhere, so finding an alternate chip doesn't solve anything. This has been a long time coming, where chip manufacturing plants have been allowed to be in Taiwan. Taiwan is on the verge of being acquired by China, and all chip manufacturing, or most chip manufacturing, taking place in one region or one part of the world was always a stupid idea. And so we need more chip manufacturing plants in other countries, and it just kind of comes down to, can you find somewhat stable countries to put in a factory and build a factory? And frankly, they need to go back in time and have built chip manufacturing plants 10 years ago. Right. Let's see, this, and this. Let's see, moving on. Our last Video Games Chronicle article for today says, Miyazaki says From Software's next game is in final stages of development. The Elden Ring director has suggested the project has been in work for 6 years. Surprising that there hadn't been any leaks on that, and I feel like there's a chance that all of that may be true, and then it comes out and it is a very different type of game that nobody is really expecting or wanting. Like, if it was something like Life is Strange, for instance, that would be kind of shocking from the Elden Ring director. Or The Sweet Life, what I think was the name of the other game that was very weird and unexpected. We'll have to go through some of these Gematsu articles. Yoni is coming to Switch on July 28th. This is a Gematsu article. This is a horror game. Famitsu review scores for issue 1751 are out. DNF Duel gets 32 out of 40. Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes 36 out of 40, so they really like that. And then apparently no score at all for Void Terrarium, which is weird because you would assume that Gematsu is getting the announcements directly from Famitsu, so it'd be weird for Famitsu to not post a score when they have been actively posting scores. It's kind of pointless to even mention it if you're not going to post a score, because Famitsu only really is known, to my mind and to Westerners, as a review score site. They don't do like written reviews in English or anything like that that I know of. Let's see. Dreadout 2 is coming to the Xbox Series and Xbox One on July 15th. PS5 and PS4 on July 20th. So, yeah. This is... I don't even have anything to say there. Let's just move forward. I think Dreadout 2 might be good. A game called Potion Permit launches September 22nd. Which, okay. Gran Turismo 7 version 1.17 update launches June 23rd. I get these points where my mouse feels like it's hitching again, and I hope it's not really doing that. But yeah. I'll check the event viewer and see if that's the case. It may have more to do with having hotkeys enabled on OBS lately than it does to do with any other problems with my computer. So if that is the problem, then I kind of know what I need to do, but I also need to figure out some trick here. Because I actually need hotkeys to work. Or some kind of hotkeys to work. Like I don't think I can send a command to OBS to get it to just start recording and everything will just work. And I could start streaming and then have hotkeys disabled at that point, but I don't think I can even do that actually, because I think that's a system setting, so it's system-wide. But without hotkeys, I can't do any solo recording. I can't start a recording and end a recording. Inherently, you were supposed to... They never got around to really getting a remote app to control OBS through like a network phone command. Like they teased that it could be done, and it worked for a brief second, but OBS remote controls never did work. Rambling. Okay, we've got 2,000. Only thing I can do is hope. Destroy this card. Summon this, I guess. So is this gonna work or is this not gonna work? Doesn't seem like it's gonna work. Gran Turismo 7 version 1.17 update launches June 23rd, according to Gamatsu. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has a new trailer and gameplay details, expansion pass announced, and more. Monster Hunter and Xenoblade Chronicles don't really feel like they are too different of games, and I think you probably would just prefer to play Monster Hunter. Maybe Xenoblade Chronicles is a little bit more anime. But that would be about it. Yeah, nothing I can do is gonna win here. A romance visual novel called La Campanella della Eterno is coming to Switch on September 29th in Japan. Seems like we may slowly be turning back towards improving the amount of visual novels, but it may also very well be a case that there's just going to be fewer visual novels in general, which might be a better thing. This definitely seems like this is more on the lewd side, showing off elf girls and in a visual novel romance experience. It was released on PC July 2021. These will be probably bulk announcements from the same publisher. A romance visual novel bundle, Harvest Overray plus Ano Ko wa Ore Kara Hanare Nai, is coming to PS4 and Switch on September 29th in Japan. And so 2 visual novels in one, which when you start to see these visual novel bundles, that probably also highlights that they aren't super long stories, at least by visual novel standards. Although you could probably squeeze about 50 visual novels onto the size of a regular disc, because there's not a lot of video or audio in visual novels taking up space. But it would be kind of crazy if you had 2 visual novels that were 200 hours each to go through all the different branches. It would be kind of crazy to bundle those kinds of games together, even if they are sequels to each other. Alright. Let's see. Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series demo is now available in Japan and Asia. Klonoa is a 3D adventure platforming game, I think, although it's not a name or a brand or a character I recognize. So I've struggled to try to think if this is a new series with a new character, or if they're bringing back a very old series that I've just never heard of, and I haven't bothered to spend the time to actually research it. A lot of this just turns into fluff, certainly, when you are playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just like, okay, something happened, something happened, something happened, whatever, you know you're gonna lose. You can't surrender, because then you don't get the 50 experience points. So you, best case scenario, just hope that you can lose quickly, or that they can find some way to, that you can find some way to help them lose, help yourself lose quickly, help the opponent win quickly. The first concept artwork for the next Ys games and interview tidbits are now available. Yoshihiro Kondo hints at a Ys-style Souls-like. See, here you have just the backs of characters fighting some monster, a lot of slashing effects, which it feels like that's way too much emphasis on slashing effects. And then you have a male character that you see the back of, and then the female character, and notice how there's a lot of effects and cloth covering this and nothing covering this, so there's definitely a preference there. Yep. We had already talked about Sega and Creative Assembly, I guess, working together to make a multiplayer first-person shooter game called Hyenas for basically everything. This might be more of a case that Sega is pretending like they're being involved, when really they are just being a publisher, and it is Creative Assembly that's actually making it. I feel like this Hyenas logo looks a lot like a Joker logo. And apparently they have an 18+ version of this trailer, which is probably the version we already looked at. Rune Factory 5 is coming to PC on July 13th. I always think the Rune Factory series is a match 3 game. And then I'm always surprised to find it to be more of a farming RPG game. It's definitely, when I do look at it, not a series that I'm particularly interested in. Alright, we've been going 2 hours, and that is the time to consider taking a 2-hour break from actually playing. We are still struggling to just get the gyms rewards. We can get, you definitely would want to get up to at least 1100 in the next couple of days. Now this says 628, but the actual event ends in a couple of days, like I think 626. So we have like 2 days, not 4. I definitely want to get to this point, and then anything I would just have to assume is gravy on top of that. I seriously doubt I'm going to have the time and energy and desire to go all the way to 2200. We're just not winning enough. Meanwhile, we are still struggling to get the all of the daily quests done, which I just got one new daily quest there because it was full, which means I'm losing on gems because of that. So I definitely need to also play ranked. I also need to watch a duel live. So let's just set that up. And they ask you to spectate these duel lives every day. I don't pay any attention to any of them at all. It's just a total waste of time. Gamatsu has an article here. The strategy RPG Tyrant's Blessing launches August 8th for Switch and PC. Dragon Quest X offline details fishing, Tombala, and doll board. I have no idea what Tombala is. Tombala, is it some kind of gambling thing? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's some kind of gambling thing. Different colored balls for different colored rewards. Nothing really looks that interesting as far as Dragon Quest X online and offline. I assume the offline and the online aren't really that different. Taiko no Tatsujin Rhythm Festival launches September 23rd. This is a drumming game. Japanese drum beating game. Nobunaga's Ambition Rebirth has its second trailer, according to Gamatsu, if you want to check that out. A smartphone game called Archetype Arcadia is coming to iOS and Android on July 1st in Japan. It's currently available for the PlayStation 5 and 4, Switch, and PC, which is odd to see I guess it's a visual novel, go to mobile phones. It kind of makes a lot of sense though. The visual novels should go to mobile phones. Mobile phones can certainly handle visual novels. If you are sitting around stuck in a commuting, having visual novels be a long-running thing might be appealing. Although also, even if you're just on a train or a bus or something, it might be very motion sick inducing to have to read while on a bus or in a car. So that might be the limiting factor here. As far as this trailer, seems like it's some kind of romance focused sci-fi story. Maybe not even sci-fi, maybe more fantasy. Let's see, Muv-Luv Alternative Total Eclipse Remastered for PC launches July 20th. It's a standalone story that plays alongside the events of Muv-Luv Alternative. I believe this also is a visual novel series. Probably same publisher making the same announcements. The fact that you see these publishers make announcements for 3, 4, 5 different visual novels at the same time shows how little concern and care there is for any of the individual games. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai, the Hinokami Chronicles, DLC character Tenjin Uzui launches in July. So it's been kind of a while since we've had a new character announced for Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai. This may be the first DLC character where the previous characters may very well have been just characters in the main game being highlighted. Demon Slayer, I think, is still fairly popular, but I also wouldn't be surprised if there's not that much popularity around it. Yep, and see, that's just a total waste of time. I didn't even bother showing you the spectate live. If I'm going to play ranked here, I want to actually win though, so I have to kind of pay attention here. So we have to be very careful about jumping over here and looking at news or games. Bullet Soul and Bullet Soul Infinite Burst is coming to the Switch on September 9th. I've never heard of a game called Bullet Soul. It's a shoot 'em up game, and I guess that's why. In all fairness, I could very possibly have heard of them. What I mean to say is I do not recollect a game called Bullet Soul, which that is more accurate. Here we have a game on Steam. Let's go through some of these. Zombies Invasions is just a top-down twin-stick shooter. Parkour Master is a Flappy Bird clone. Perfect Jump is a Frogger clone of no real interest, although it's kind of nicely polished. Do I want to cancel that? Here we have a game called Archer Brains, which just looks like a low-effort platform. Here we have the Backrooms Mass Extinction. We're still getting Backrooms-themed low-effort games. Although, if these images actually load, I would say this Backrooms game visually looks more polished than most, and looks like it has more assets flipped into it than you would normally expect. Like thematically, the Backrooms look like the Backrooms as far as an internet myth, if they simply just have a terrible yellow wallpaper, the stairs and cones and gaps and things like that. Those are all kind of new. Gotta still focus on playing. Summon this. Activate this. This guy is wrecking me. Yeah, I think I've potentially lost already. Yeah, totally lost. Yeah, even though this does seem like it has a lot more variety to it, there doesn't seem to be an actual person or interaction here. No puzzles, no characters, no gameplay mechanics. So that's still very much a no. Cube Decider here is a dungeon crawler, which looks slightly different, but still doesn't really look like anything you'd want to play. So that's going to be a no. Because of the spotlights, not spotlights, I'm going to accidentally call them spotlights all the time, I think. Because of the YouTube Shorts now, this Friday will be the point where I start to think about what is going to go up to Monday or Tuesday, and then what is going to get removed and just abandoned. as far as games to spotlight. None of this is gonna work. I've lost. Although, I probably should just activate this for daily quests. Here we have a game on Steam called Here to There, which looks like a puzzle game. It's probably nothing, but unlike the Backrooms game, at least it does present that there might be an experience and a gameplay mechanic, so I'll put that on the follow list. Definitely not putting that in the YouTube short. Here we have a game called My Naughty Summer Vacation, but it definitely does not feel like this is a game that has been tagged with any adult content. Looks like it's probably a Chinese visual novel if I was to guess. $15.99, English and Chinese, and no mature content warning at all. And I didn't play fast enough and I surrendered, which that sucks too, but you don't really lose as much playing ranked and then getting distracted as you do playing the festivals and getting distracted. You lose slightly more playing the festival games. Detective Max Double Clues. Again, this might be a hidden objects type game. That there might be something to this, but there probably isn't. It's easy enough simply just to put it on the follow list and not spend any more time thinking about it. Here we have a text-based game called Social Services of the Doomed, which we can say no to. Bullet Bash looks like just a asset flip rocket jump shooter Quake clone. Here we have a Chinese first-person shooter asset flip. Really? Zombie shooter? $8.39, Chinese only. We're really getting back to seeing a lot of Chinese games, but not as much as we used to. Ragnar here is seemingly maybe a platforming puzzle game. It suffers a little bit from dark screenshot syndrome, but I'll be cautious and put it on the follow list anyways. Pretty much any game ever set in darkness is making a mistake, and they really should, even if you are in a dark cave, you should immediately turn on some light source and light up and show the audiovisual medium of video games that you can actually present something audiovisually. This Tower Princess Knight's Trial game is probably nothing, but I'm not sure. I'm having a hard time even really figuring out what it is. And the animation style is slightly odd because there's kind of a thick outline around the characters. Procedurally generated rooms and dungeons to save a princess while playing as a knight. Rescue all the princes and princesses. Yeah, there might be something to that. It is an interesting idea, certainly, to focus away from just having to defeat something, because in a procedurally generated environment, like having to defeat a boss and then a sub-boss and then another sub-boss and then another sub-boss and the final boss is typically what you have in roguelikes, or roguelites in this case. Here we have a game called Zuria, which doesn't look like anything. It's very low polygon. Here we have a game called Crazy Cook, which is a VR game. I'll give it a follow. we might be in danger here where there aren't actually any games worth spotlighting or showing off in the YouTube Shorts, which at a certain point, fine. If we just miss a day, we'll miss a day. That's what it gets down to. Worst case scenario is that I would have nothing to show and nothing scheduled up until Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday just wouldn't have any YouTube Shorts come out. So you're talking 2 days at most. Let's see, we have a game on Steam here called Project Lazarus, which looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter. A lot of neon bullet hell shooting going on. Not really my style of game. It looks alright though, not terrible. Here we have a game called Him and Her Collection, which maybe is a little too emphasizing black on gray, so they don't have to really color things in. You can see the animation style's not here. I can't help but assume that there are just some people that are really decent at programming. Personally, as somebody who was trained in programming, I could probably do a decent job making a game programming wise, but I could not do anything as far as the animation. And if you just don't have the skills to get somebody to work with you, or the funding to get someone to work with you, I feel like there are some people out there that just end up doing some very basic animation, and honestly I couldn't even do this level of animation if I tried. Programming is very much more of a left brain, where drawing is a right brain activity. So yeah, I do suspect there are some people out there just desperate to get a game out there, and then they make things that are simplistically animated to hide from their lack of skill that they're ashamed of. Like some of these Game Boy games, I feel like that is very possibly the same situation too. I would be fairly better at making a small pixel art character that looked decent enough compared to trying to draw a bigger, more zoomed in character. Alright, so much for that. So can I activate that when that is special summoned? I thought I could. But it doesn't seem like it's letting me. During your main phase, if your opponent normal special summon 5 monsters or more this turn, you can tribute. I guess that's a question as to what a turn is. This isn't going to work particularly well. Just go ahead and return that. See, really this card only consolidates other cards, so if you could summon the other cards after the fact, that would be what would be helpful. So if I could activate this, which I can't, it would have tributed those 2 cards. This might work. Because I can now bring about this card, put this face up, activate this effect, discard that card, destroy that, put that back here. Next, what you want to do is, I think, this card. And then activate this effect. Detaching that. And then taking that. Next, what you want to do is one of these. Not that it really changes too much. And then you want to do this. Not that it changes too much. All you're really doing is trying to get more things that will end up in the graveyard at the end. Attach 1 material, target Zodiac, and special summon it. So, detach something like that, which doesn't change the attack. Then summon, I guess that, which will have more of an attack. That gets us a nice start. Looking at games again, Hunt for the Junk, I think we'd already looked at. It's definitely a Game Boy platforming type game, not something of interest. Here we have Blade Runner Enhanced Edition, which is mostly negative, which I'm going to put this on the follow list because there's definitely some relevancy to the Blade Hunter game. But it seems like Night Dive Studios here may have done a bad job on re-releasing it, which we have heard of either Pico Software or Night Dive Software doing a pretty bad job. Let's see. It's a huge disappointment. Get it from Good Old Games instead, where it comes bundled with the original Blade Runner, which plays perfectly playable on ScumVM. Play that instead. This is not an enhanced edition of the game. It's actually a lot worse and missing several minor changes to the original has. Do not buy this version. Good Old Games has the original version available, and their version runs without any trouble. Yeah. So this really just seems like a horrible, horrible adaptation. And there's definitely some truth to that I think I was saying, or some observations I was definitely seeing when they had announced this, because they had announced this and then they were putting like side-by-side screenshots up, and the enhanced version looked worse than the original version. There is kind of a randomization factor on Blade Runner as to who is a replicant or who isn't. And yeah, that leads to some replayability. But yeah, inherently the problem is they should have just not, I don't even know how to really say it, they should have not bothered. If the original game runs on ScumVM, don't bother trying to upgrade it unless you can actually upgrade it. And if anything, this is just another example of Night Dive kind of failing where it should be succeeding. Okay, I can get to a 2300 that way, or I can get to a 3000 that way. But I think what we want to do is summon this, do this, do this. Activate his effect. Activate that effect. Don't cancel anything. Send that to the graveyard. Banish that card. I'm exhausting his card options. He's got only 2 cards next turn that he can play with, so he may just concede. Or maybe not. This is a real shame though. Like, and it does test a question certainly as to should I do games to watch on games that are immediately negatively received, or should I be all about positivity and curate towards that? That's an interesting question. If we look at Night Dive Studio games, they have gotten the license to release a lot of games. The Shadow Man Remastered, kind of not badly received, 95% positive. So they have done better. They've just really failed on this one. In fact, if we're looking down here, I own a lot of Night Dive games, so it's Picosoft that's usually the ones that kind of sucks. I just surrendered when I was winning. Again, it's just not doable. The timer is too short. It's not like I even have gotten anywhere as far as these ranked duels. Alright, well, let's just focus on talking about this. Yeah, there's a considerable number of games here, and the vast majority of them are either neutral or positive. We have Tex Murphy Oversea is negative, and Deadlock Planetary Conquest negative, and Womb Room negative. Sin Reloaded apparently is coming. But yeah, Night Dive has not really built a bad name for itself, so they really failed there. Now arguably they could turn this around by saying, hey, we're going to release the original version of the game, which I hope they have the rights to also, and saying we're working on it. But why even push it out? Like, they haven't put any advertisement behind this, really. They really haven't tried to promote it, so why not just delay it and do it right? And I think particularly we're in a case where the YouTube Shorts probably would benefit from covering negative ones as much as covering positive ones, and getting people to comment and have reactions to certain games probably would be helpful too. So yeah, I don't think I can just say I'm only covering positive games, particularly on this weekend. I'm not going to have that many games to show anyways. Here we have a game called Fake Racing, which I'm not sure if there is actually racing in it even, or if it's just video being played. Regardless, there's never been a case where racing games look like this. In fact, racing games often look very, very good. So I don't know why you would do this visual gimmick. It's the wrong type of game to have this gimmick. Even in the Obra Dinn game, The Return of the Obra Dinn, that had that kind of visual gimmick, that was really just a distraction. And I would love to see a reskin of Obra Dinn that made the graphics just look normal, because the fake visual imagery styles was weird. Here we have a game that immediately says epilepsy warning and just looks like a logic game of some sort. I'll give it a follow, but I'm not expecting much from it. Here we have Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which it's already over 30 reviews and it's mostly positive, so I can just go ahead and put this on the wish list. This also is a game worth pointing out. Now I do have a problem, and I'm really bad at, I have yet to figure out how to modify the custom CSS code on Chrome browser sources on OBS. So anytime there is a summer sale icon like this, or that the character is that the developer is live streaming, that breaks the YouTube Shorts algorithm. Not the algorithm, the YouTube Short OBS macro I made to record the videos. So this may not be a game that gets spotlighted simply because of the 2K summer sale at the top. Well, I'll have to just see if I can wait for it. I did have to wait until one developer stopped playing a game to make one of the spotlights. But this definitely is a game that should be spotlighted and talked about and highlighted. Whereas May's Pedestal of the Trials here is nothing. And Quester here is nothing. Let's jump back to the Gametsu articles. We still got a lot of them. Alice Gear Aegis CS Concerto of Simulacrax has a customization trailer. This looks like some pretty poorly animated anime girls in mech suits, old battle armor, whatever. I don't even know what you would really call it. I think battle armor probably is better than calling it a mech suit. Yep. The actual game seems to be mostly just a 3D fighting game that probably controls pretty badly if the visuals look that rough. Definitely not impressed by that. The Famitsu sales have been updated for this week. Overlord Escape from Nazarick taking the 7th spot as a new thing, and then the next new thing is Sniper Elite 5 in the 25th spot. We can see hardware sales here though, where Xbox Series X and S selling nearly 7,000 units and having a lifetime of 240,000 units, compared to the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Digital Edition selling nearly 3,000 units. But overall, the PlayStation 5 has sold 1.4 million, really closer to 1.6 million units. So it would have to be much longer sales trend for Xbox to really beat PlayStation in Japan. Plus, you also have the PlayStation 4, which is sold only 18 units, still having 7 million units over its lifetime being sold. Whereas the 360 probably sold close to 300,000 units in Japan, if I were to guess. Very low numbers. Although it kind of doesn't matter. It only takes I would suspect a couple of Golden Week / Christmas seasons to go by, and the concept of the Japanese people moving off of a fad or treating PlayStation 5 like it's a fad and moving to Xbox might happen. If on the shelves they know Xboxes are the only thing they can buy, they will just start buying Xboxes, or they'll buy nothing. So yeah, if Microsoft could hold their lead through Christmas, that would be amazing success for them. If they could hold their lead through Golden Week in Japan, that would be amazing success for them. If they can hold it through another Christmas, that would be another huge success. And if they could hold it through another Golden Week, at that point, I say Xbox probably is won, and people will not be interested in PlayStations at all. Which maybe they're not that interested even now for other reasons. Let's see, No Man's Sky for the Switch launches October 7th alongside a PlayStation 5 Physical Edition. Like Gamatsu says, Utu no Prince Sama All-Star After Secret for Switch launches December 22nd in Japan. This is, I assume, a visual novel. Yeah, it's part of the visual novel database. Looks like it's a young maiden otome visual novel. This was originally released on the PSP in 2015. A lot of these games that are getting re-released that are visual novels are not getting remastered at all, by the way. It's like they're still using the same level of graphics and audio and such, and there's just no real need to remaster and no remastering that you really could do. It's just static images. It is also, I think, worth pointing out that it is kind of silly to look at Japan's marketplace for consoles as an Xbox versus PlayStation fight, when clearly it's a Nintendo Switch versus PlayStation fight. And the vast majority of people are not moving from PlayStation 5 to Xbox, they are moving from PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 to Nintendo Switch and just living with that. Moving on, A Plague Tale Requiem launches October 18th with extended gameplay trailer if you want to check that out on Gamatsu instead of Video Games Chronicles. A roguelike deck builder Brave Rage early access adds English and Japanese language support. Which this looks like it's a positional placement strategy RPG, although they're calling it a deck builder. See if we can see if there actually is cards you're playing. I guess there are cards that you're playing with, and it's not so much strategic placement. Overall, though, it doesn't really look that interesting. My teen romantic comedy Snafu game collection is coming to Switch on September 22nd in Japan. This includes the first two My Teen romantic comedy Snafu games. It's nicely animated characters there. I said in the last stream that if you see this kind of bow tie that tends to be more middle school than high school, I think I was right about that, but I may also be wrong. I'm going to say I'm at 50-50 now as to whether I believe that. In the previous example, there was a younger looking character with a tied kind of necklace. But she didn't have a blazer, it didn't have a logo on it, and different characters in the school were wearing different kinds of coats, which seemed odd. This still seems a little odd too. If this was like the summer outfit, you'd still kind of expect the guy to have a tie on, and at least in this case the blazers are the same, and I think the skirts are the same. So maybe this is closer to the end of middle school or the beginning of high school dress, and the other game was the beginning of middle school dress, or maybe it's just different schools dress differently in Japan. It's very possible. If anything, when you look at kind of this more 80s anime style, it was a lot more fun in the 80s when you saw anime characters. They tended, even if they were drawn to look potentially like they might be high schoolers or younger adults, they tended not to dress in school uniforms and boring outfits. They tended to be in sci-fi stories or fantasy worlds in much more varied costumes. That fetishization, for one reason or another, the obsession around Japanese schools and their dress code, which happens, I think, both in Japan and out of Japan, was not there in the 80s, and it was probably better off for it, because now it's kind of boring. You don't see visual novels with characters in fantasy worlds that often. In fact, you don't see things even that colorful anymore, and we've kind of lost that. Anyways, the actual article here is that the Cosmic Fantasy Collection has been announced for Switch. It's a crowdfunding campaign, apparently seeks 300 million yen, which is $300,000. It would include the RPG Cosmic Fantasy Adventure Boy Yui and sequel Cosmic Fantasy 2 Adventure Boy Van. That is definitely an 80s anime type name. No video or anything, unfortunately. Let's see. A game called The Future You've Been Dreaming Of for PC launches July 15th. It's currently available for the Switch. This is one of those fantasy girlfriend games. As more and more Japanese people have never even been on a date, they are falling more and more into fantasy because they have no other options. Sometimes you're a ghost and you're influencing the character as to what you're doing, as you're voyeuristically watching them and spying on them. Sometimes you're an actual character. There's a lot of hints that you'll see a lot of lewd or nudity or lewd poses in games like this, and there might be a little bit of lewd poses here and there, but it definitely isn't going to be the vast majority of the game. In fact, it's pretty much a bait and switch game, I would suspect. Moving on, RPG Maker Unite details Switch line feature and the final 2 default characters. So here you have a collection of poses for a character. And then the Switch line feature looks somewhat like Unity and Unreal, as they try to make it look really easy to program games in RPG Maker, and it is far too easy probably to program games in RPG Maker, seeing how many RPG Maker garbage games get made. But it's still programming at a certain level. It still takes skill and knowledge and education. So apparently it's going to be a literal Switch depiction as a concept, although it doesn't actually feel like there is actually a literal visual Switch in the programming software. Moving on, Grim Grimoire once more has a 6th trailer, which at a certain level you have to applaud the tenacity of some Japanese game developers putting out 6 different trailers. It's not that uncommon. Showing off some monsters on the different levels of this kind of, you'd almost call it a tower defense strategy game. Not a tower defense game. They're calling it a real-time strategy game. Tower climbing game might be a good word for it. Star Ocean: The Divine Force focused Star Ocean Special Edition is set for June 29th, which I guess that means they're going to have a presentation. Like all of this in quotes is what they'll be focusing on June 29th. I need to drink some water here. wearing out my voice talking so much. Way of the Hunter launches August 16th. I'm always looking for a hunting game. I don't particularly want to play a bunch of them, but if they could make one that was fairly good and lasted a good like 10 years, say, here's your simulation of hunting where you don't have to risk your life or hurt real animals, that might be interesting. I really wouldn't buy into the idea that a hunting video game would be much of a gateway drug towards actually hunting. But I also suspect there's not that many people who actually want to do hunting, so that's why we don't see a lot of... I'm not sure any hunting game has ever been good at all. Let's see, Sega Genesis / Mega Drive Mini 2 titles, 12 and 22 announced. These are the mini Sega Genesis that was released, I think, only in Japan, and now they're talking about the ROMs of old games. Apparently a Cyber Stick controller is also announced. Looking at the names of these games, Splatterhouse 2 is recognizable, nothing else. And yeah, these definitely would be Japanese games for the Japanese market. There's no indication at all that these are going to ever be released in the West. And I don't see any picture here of what the fight stick would look like. Probably the Cyber Stick probably is something that has already, that would look just like whatever the Cyber Stick was originally, so it'd be fairly easy to look up. And so I'll just leave that to my audience to check out if they care. But yeah, in a funny way, this is exactly what I'm talking about as far as Sega not really caring about games enough, because when you look at the Sega Genesis titles that they were able to bring ROMs about, there's very little that has relevancy. Afterburner 2 was like technically important, but not culturally important. Outrun, somewhat culturally important in the old days, but like Nadia the Secret of the Blue Water is based off a old anime that nobody remembers, or Columns is not going to have any impact in modern days. None of these games are on their third reboot or 5th to 12th game where they really should be if Sega had funded those games and continued to make those kinds of games instead of just really abandoning making games. And then our final Gematsu article here is from Software. An unannounced title is in the final stage of development. The next title, directed by Hidetaki Miyazaki, is underway. From Software is hiring for several new projects. And then we jump over the games that we had already looked at and that we're holding on to. And then we'll wrap up the last of the games that came out on Steam. Here we have a game called Night of the Loving Dead, which, it's a good pun. It's a perfectly fine pun. But there's no gimmick there. There's no game. It's still just an asset flip zombie first-person shooter. Looks a little low polygon too. It does not seem like these zombies are really trying to love you or you're trying to love them. And you've taken this name from somebody who could have done something better with this. Just for a moment, mentally block out the thumbnail and the screenshots and imagine a game called Night of the Living Dead, and it's a Japanese first person shooter with anime girls who are zombies who are chasing after you, like in that other game that I can't remember the name of. I want to say Kokatsu Party, but that's not it. But yeah, if it was that the zombies were in love with you, whether that's done with anime girls, well, all as zombies, although almost certainly that would be how I'd assume it would go. But if the zombies even hyper-realistically had something where they were in love with you, but then they were grotesque and you still had to run away from them, there needs to be a gameplay twist to that, a visual twist to that, something that actually justifies using a pawn up. And this game definitely just doesn't do that. We have a game called I Commissioned Some Bees, which I have to assume is a point-and-click adventure game. I paid 10 more others to hide bees in the artwork. Can you find them all? Warning, relaxing. Wow. So, very lazy title. Probably paying artists just on something like Fiverr or something, the lowest of the lowest rates to make art to then sell. It's almost a decent scam too. Let's say you paid 10 artists $5 to make a single picture. Probably not. You're probably closer to $50 for a picture, if not more. And then let's say you paid $50 times 10, you spent $500, then you asset flip it very cheaply, close to free, to sell on Steam. You spend another $100 to list it on Steam Direct. You're $600 in the hole. Selling the game at $1.50, you need 3,000 units sold. That's probably what would kill you, almost certainly, is that you're not going to get 3,000 units of sales for a low effort game like this. But I could certainly see people thinking they would. There are definitely a lot of people that if they could just sell 3,000 copies of a game they made would be ecstatic by that. Or if they could sell 3,000 of anything. Like, if I could make a lemonade stand and sell 3,000 cups of lemonade, I would be ecstatic. Although, usually when you start to think about real business instead of scams, you have to think about, can I do this every day? Can I make this a consistent business model? Or is this something that's just going to work for a short time and then I'm going to exhaust the potential number of buyers? Regardless, that's not a game worth playing. Here we have a RPG game called Aragon's Tale, which kind of looks like RPG Maker, but I wouldn't be surprised if it actually isn't made in RPG Maker. It's free. Here we have a game called Yunderworld Interview with the Void, which looks like it's probably a Western visual novel. Yeah, English only makes me assume that. A lot of these Western visual novels go with art styles that are just borderline softcore porn. This is a pretty extreme depiction. You're crossing from lewd to just extreme, and they seem to lack subtlety a lot. And that's certainly saying something. I'll put this on the fault list just in case. Though it certainly is saying something when the Japanese visual novels are the ones that are more subtle. Skies of the Blue remake here looks like nothing. Viltnimda looks like nothing. Blurry, dark buildings. We have a game called Jishogi, which I don't think there's really a game here I want to play either. Take note though, it is Friday, and unless we come back on Monday, and frankly we are going to have to start looking on Monday instead of on Fridays, because it's a little premature when I start streaming early in the morning for me to say, well, this Friday I have not seen any games that were tagged adult content. But yeah, that is what I want to point out, is that we have gone through quite a few games today, not a single one of them tagged adult content. So this might be the weekend where nothing gets released and then held up until next weekend. Well, here we have just a Chinese game of some sort. No interest in that. But even that pattern, which was fairly consistent, has stopped being so consistent. But Mr. Fantastic's Freaky Figurine Shop does not look like a game I want to play. So it's also like some student project, it looks like. University of Texas at Austin. Honestly, the screenshots might be the problem with this game, because the actual gameplay could be doable. Maybe the problem, I would say, is it has too many characters and too many different colors for a color palette. It's also making an odd pastel color palette, which doesn't work. I'm going to put this on the follow list just to see it as a student project, but I wouldn't really suggest anybody play it. Here we have a hidden object game. You know, we've been seeing very few hidden object type adventure games lately. We haven't been seeing Big Fish Games put out one on a weekly basis. We haven't been seeing anybody else step up to replace Big Fish Games releases. Skydome here doesn't look like a modern game enough. You told me this was an old game about dragons, I'd believe you, but I still wouldn't think it was worth buying. The Capcom Fighting Collection. This is rated fairly positively, so I'll just go ahead and put this on the wish list. This is yet another game to potentially spotlight. Here we have a game called The Sound of Fireworks, The Haiku, which looks like it's a visual novel, but I suspect it's being animated by a Westerner. There's a lot of variety, certainly, in the way it's being drawn. It feels like a Westerner animated this to make it look like a Japanese visual novel, and the language also implies that that is the case, and the title, The Haiku, also implies that's the case. And this is kind of the prime example of what a Westerner should not do in a visual novel. Don't try to draw an anime-like character when you don't have much of a chance at all of doing that. Don't draw a Japanese style room when no Westerner would have like a table on the floor like that and TVs low down on the floor like you're sitting like that. Don't draw people in school outfits that are more like Japanese school outfits. Don't try to draw the schools to look like Japanese schools. Yeah. Ironically, this is fairly inaccurate for a Japanese kitchen, too. Like, you're really not going to have this big of a kitchen in any Japanese house. So, stories, I guess, in general, should have a identity and a cultural identity if they're going to infuse the story with that, and it's trying to take someone else's leads to almost a guaranteed bad story, enough that I don't feel like I need to put this on the follow list. Plus the graphics don't look that good. Here we have a game called How I Learned to Skate, which is tagged as a physics difficult and psychological horror game. But looking at the screenshots and such, I imagine it is just wonky physics and not something I really want to play with. Yeah, looks like you have to do a ridiculous amount of controls to control things and skate. Yeah, that's definitely not something I want to play. And then why are they comparing this to the Force Unleashed Ultimate Sith Edition? I have no idea. I really wish Steam's recommendation algorithm would just be suspended until they can get it right or be improved. These recommendations also just tag based and often completely wrong. And at a certain point you almost expect them to be wrong because these are new games, but they should probably just put a wait cooldown timer on recommendations on new games if that's going to be the case, if they don't have enough data. YouTube has a similar problem where you put out a new video and they have no data on it, so they don't know who to really recommend it to, so they kind of don't recommend it to anybody. But then they double that problem by also determining that the videos aren't good because nobody was recommended the videos in the first place, and thus nobody played the videos and watched them. Warbox Sandbox here does not look interesting. Here we have a game called Simba the Cat, which looks like a joke game. Playing a game as a cat is not crazy, but playing a game where a cat rides a motorcycle and a go-kart and swims and rides a horse and drives a car is too much. That's ridiculous. Here we have a game called the Horse Trilogy, which doesn't look good. If you told me this was a really old game, yeah, apparently these are ZX Spectrum games, but that doesn't really mean you need to play them or that they have relevancy. So I'm going to say no to that. Here we have a LGBTQ plus RPG called The Coven of Kalohi, which just looks like an RPG Maker game. Yeah, we have a game called Online Sparkler, which doesn't seem like it's actually a game at all. This is probably another... Well, no, it's a Japanese low effort, like, desktop toy. I was going to say Chinese, but I was wrong. Here we have the Adventures of the Adventure Submarine USS 101, which that doesn't look like anything. We have 3 more games. Here we have one called Ganbaru, which looks like it's a precision platforming game. Really not my style. Plus kind of empty. Repetitive backgrounds, repetitive tile sets, no enemies in any of the screenshots. Yeah, that's not screaming quality. Here we have a game called Fanatic Zeal, which seems to be a military mob fighting game. Hack and slash game. I assume the green guy is with the blue team and not just trying to kill both sides. And I kind of assume that you defeat enough of the red guys and they will eventually turn into blue guys. And that there might be a game that would work around that concept, but this one's not polished enough to be that game. Then last game we have is Dimensions of the Mind, which looks like it's just an asset flip garbage game. Let's see, our GameDeveloper.com articles. Keyboard and mouse support for Xbox Cloud Gaming is on the way. Microsoft is now encouraging developers to start adding keyboard and mouse support to their games. I heavily suspect that either with Windows 11 or Windows 12, the Xboxes of that time, the Series X's, whatever they are going to try and release a desktop mode app, something that doesn't really make the whole machine have to reboot into a desktop, and it's going to be 90% at least towards what a PC experience would be. And they're going to say, yeah, just plug in a mouse, plug in a keyboard, and you've got a computer here to go. Now would definitely be the time to do that with the part shortage and chip shortage. People aren't going to be buying computers, and it doesn't have to do much to make Microsoft happy to offer that function. It really doesn't have to do much to make most people happy adding that feature. Xbox is already run on a version of Windows, so it would only be adding in the parts that they had taken out previously. And it only has to basically do Edge browsing to make Microsoft happy. If they get more people using Edge as the browser, and if they have it kind of locked down so you can't install other browsers, they'll try to get away with that. And then if it has just Office Cloud support, so you can do Excel sheets and Word documents and PowerPoints and maybe Paint stuff, that's all most people would want. They might bring in like Visual Studio Code Online or something like that to this desktop mode. They'll probably put in a few features like calculators, clocks, and music players, but it doesn't have to really run every single Windows app that ever existed, but it potentially could run every single Windows app that existed also, and that would just be extra gravy. Like, it may get down to the point where they might have such compatibility if they were to put a Windows 11 or Windows 12 desktop mode onto the Xbox. There might be so much compatibility that you can just buy an Xbox and then install Steam and play Steam games on the hardware. And that might be enough to even satisfy Microsoft, even though they'd be losing some money on those types of sales. They would just have to assume that at some point you'd end up buying another console or buying a few games for an Xbox Series X. Moving on from that baseless speculation, I really have no evidence towards that theory. I just kind of suspect that might be what is going to happen, is that some form of desktop mode will appear on Xbox services or hardware. Not services, hardware. Overwatch currencies will transfer over to Overwatch 2, but loot boxes are going nowhere. So we had already talked about that. PlayStation veterans form a new studio called Lithos, which will focus on Web3 games. I think this is the two people, trying to make the NFT games. Although one source called it NFT games, one course called it Web3 games. Lithos, I guess you'd maybe pronounce it like a we. Lithos is probably a terrible name because half the people are going to assume it means Lithos and assume that means they're lying about something. So you've picked a name, and it's hard to get a name that you can copyright, certainly, but you've picked one that definitely does not inspire confidence in your company. Let's see, Netflix subscribers will be able to play Into the Breach on iOS and Android. I've been trying to watch Stranger Things while I'm sitting around being too tired from the heat. And the latest season of Stranger Things, it's just too long. That first episode is like an hour and a half, hour 50 minutes, and the episodes get shorter somewhat, but there's just no control on the lengths of them, and they needed to have been really tight 45-minute episodes, cut some things around, focus on different things. There's too many characters in the series in the first place. but they have like two groups separated, so it would have probably made a lot of sense to have one episode highlight what one group of people is doing, and then have a different episode highlight what's happening in the other episode, and then eventually get them all together for the last couple episodes. But that's not what they're doing. Also, you could have just better interconnected it, shown what both groups are doing, or really it's closer to 4 or 5 groups, and then have shorter episodes that way. The actor who plays Freddy Krueger, who's pretty old now, is playing a different character in Stranger Things, but they're making Freddy Krueger Easter egg references, certainly. I seriously doubt they'll ever bring the actor who played Freddy Krueger originally back. If they are going to make a new Freddy Krueger series, you almost would want to have him be CGI from the beginning, or definitely a younger actor who could do more action-oriented things. Moving on, back to news. Dead Cells developers have dropped a surprise accessibility update. Now more players can get killed horribly by horrible monsters in Dead Cells. The question really is, what is the accessibility? All the new features are under a section called Assist Mode in the games. Players are able to turn new modes to help players in the game, select new input options, and calibrate video and sound options. New game options include a continue mode, which again they keep saying easy modes are accessibility modes, and it is the kind of changing of the meaning of words that nobody likes. Nobody likes when you believe in something, you've been calling yourself something, and then all of a sudden the definition of that something has been shifted. Words' definitions should not shift, even if they do over time. Literally is supposed to mean literally. It's not supposed to mean figuratively or literally or both or neither. That is a great example. Accessibility is supposed to mean, and it is always meant in the minds of people, that it is for people with special needs and that need assistance. It is never supposed to have meant an easy mode for players who are not disabled in any way, but just bad at playing video games. If we're going to make an argument that people who are bad at playing video games are disabled, then I demand my disability check now, and I think many other people would too. That is ridiculous. But yeah, the first option they talk about is a continue mode, which honestly, I'd even turn that on. I just hate that this is being advertised as an accessibility. Auto hit modes, that might be an accessibility issue if mashing buttons hurts your fingers, but continuing mode I don't think falls under that category. You can also adjust trap damage and slowing down the parrying window and trap speeds. Changing inputs and binding buttons is accessibility. You're customizing heads-up display transparency and size. Maybe some of that's accessibility, but frankly those should just be functions. Everything that every game has. Use Arial fonts instead of other fonts. Myst 4 has a terrible font. If I could turn that to Arial, I would. Change the colors of for different updates. Players with hemophobia and similar conditions, you can now turn off the blood. Again, that's ridiculously too accommodating. But I can also see most games probably have to turn off the blood anyways in certain regions, so you might as well have it as a default feature. One of the big problems though is all of these features are getting ad hoc added to games individually. And really, these are concepts where Xbox and PlayStation should come together and they should just say, hey, let's have an advanced programmable interface where you first launch a console, you set and adjust these settings to mean something, and they are just set it and forget it at the beginning. You don't have to adjust it or figure out where these options, if they even exist, are in each individual game. Um, and of course, it should be profile based, not just console based. Um, so it wouldn't be you buy a console and set it up immediately. It would be you buy a console, you make a profile, and then you set it up for that profile. Finally, they said players can customize game sound to better fit their auditory needs via a mix of sound priority systems and customized categories of sound effects. Which, yeah. What do you lose in this is often the argument when somebody does something like this that is extra and over the top, and certainly I would call having all these systems on a fairly old game at this point extra and over the top. What you lose effectively is Dead Cells 2. As far as I know, there's been no announcement for Dead Cells 2. There's been no proof of life that they're even working on a Dead Cells 2, or that the creators of Dead Cells are working on anything. So it is very possible that Motion Twin, the developer of Dead Cells, has been obsessed about adding accessibility features to a game that already exists instead of making a better game, or making a sequel, or making a different game. And that hurts the game industry as much as not having accessibility. It hurts it more. Not having games is way worse. Not having competition is way worse than not having accessibility issues that affect small percentages of players. And yeah, I can't see an argument that isn't the case. So yeah, I'm glad to see these accessibility features, but if you really cared, they should have been there day one. If you didn't get them in on day one, you should have just abandoned that concept. If they told me Dead Cells 2 was going to have all these features, and then they would retroactively add them after they released Dead Cells 2, I'd be okay with that too. But the way it's being presented definitely makes it seem like they've wasted time making accessibility features instead of Dead Cells 2. And more people would have been happy with Dead Cells 2. Moving on, online bans in Minecraft will soon be applicable. Can't say the word for a second there. To private servers. The subtitle here, they have typed in minor offenses, spelled MINER. I saw someone on Reddit really upset, and I couldn't figure out why they were upset that they had been permanently banned. What I think is happening here, though, is not... I don't think this is a case where Minecraft is becoming fairly draconian, and if you were to buy and pay to have a Minecraft realm for personal and private servers, that you could then ban somebody in your personal private realm server, and then that would get them banned from playing Minecraft altogether. Mojang will introduce new rules for reported players that allows them to be banned from both online play and realms after a moderator review. Maybe that is exactly what they're going to do, is that they're going to just start banning people from all online play on Minecraft. Which, yeah, I definitely don't want to go the Bedrock edition if there's a chance that you can be banned, and young kids play Minecraft, they're gonna do trolly bad things. Certainly, they don't deserve to be banned for life from their favorite game just because of blowing up some place with TNT. Excuse me, I'm getting that tickle in my throat. I'm gonna cough. Been a while since I've had a major coughing fit like that, but it's been also a while since I've done any pre-recording and streaming. Yeah, this could be a nightmare scenario, certainly, where we start to see a lot of little kids getting banned from playing online. Although maybe a little bit of little kids just need to learn that lesson if they really are doing something terrible. Like, one would also assume that it should be probably limited to just things they're typing in the chat that would be offensive. Because griefing people and blowing up their things should not allow people to report or mass report somebody and get them banned from Minecraft, because that's part of Minecraft. If you don't want that, you make a spectator mode, survival mode server where they can't blow things up. Or a creative mode where it can be undone fairly quickly. There's always been, if you were running Java Minecraft servers, a need to make backups and just have every 5 minutes a backup being made in case somebody decides to TNT a huge project you're working on. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com has a article here. Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot forgoes some pay as the company misses financial targets. The long-serving Ubisoft boss has accepted significant reduction in compensation, which doesn't really mean anything. He's already rich, and he already has a whole bunch of stocks, so he almost certainly lost more money in just stocks going down than he would in losing an annual payment. The fact that CEOs can say, well, I'll take $1 for my annual salary and still survive, shows that CEOs are way overpowered, and that if pay is supposed to be in any way associated with doing good at your job, or a way of like promoting the idea of doing good at your job, or punishing people that are doing bad at their job, it definitely shouldn't be a situation where there's a whole class of people that can go 1, 2, 3 years, maybe their whole life, taking no income at all from their job and still live far better than the vast majority of people in the world. You never hear a story, and it's probably never going to be a case where such a story could happen, where a CEO says they've been fined for the company missing financial targets, that they lose actual money from their own bank account and have to pay it back, or that they've been or that they've voluntarily paid back into the company due to a company missing financial targets. So as soon as they get paid, they lock in those profits. But if they do a bad job, well, they'll just get paid a little bit less for doing a bad job. And very rarely does a CEO get fired. And Yves Guillemot, I'm not going to say he deserves to be fired. I don't really believe that to be the case. I'm not sure. I don't really know the person or haven't researched it, but he probably should think about retiring and letting Ubisoft have some better leadership, because Ubisoft as a company has been just mired in a lot of a lot of controversy, much of which I don't think is their fault, but they haven't really handled it great either. And from game to game, they're not really doing a great job either. Like the latest Assassin's Creed isn't knocking anyone's socks off, and outside of Assassin's Creed, I don't even know what Ubisoft makes as games. They often make these like small games they publish and that have very little impact. And then GameDeveloper.com's last article we have is that Bungie has filed a $7.6 million lawsuit against the fake DMCA takedowns that wounded the Destiny community. And then we've got some follow list cleanup. A game here called Sparky, which is a platform shooter game. And normally I would say no to this, but I think this one is more of a throwback in a modern programming language. It's from Nicholas, which I believe Team Nicholas is the people that are working on Binding of Isaac now. Binding of Isaac Rebirth. And so that's why I'm kind of making an exception with Sparky and putting it on the wish list. Although, if we get back to looking at what Nicholas has other than Binding of Isaac, they have a Puzzle Fighter clone, Crystal Crisis. They have a Japanese RPG. They have Blade Strangers, which is a fighting game, including some of their other characters. They also, I think, have the other swinging games. Nope, they don't. This character is from a swinging game, but they don't seem to publish that game. Well, regardless, yeah, that I think deserves it. Here we have a competitive puzzle / shooting game. I don't know why I really would have even put this on the follow list. It really isn't my style of game. Seems like it's a odd collection. I have to assume that sometimes I just accidentally click on things and put them on the follow list, or games get removed and replaced sometimes. Although it doesn't really make sense that the numbers, the each app ID should be unique forever. But Spark and Sparkle, obviously it's going to be a no. Spare Teeth VR, I think we can say is a no. It doesn't have any relevancy. Really should just pull the trigger as far as VR games and just take them all off. My concern right now is that if in a kind of depressive motion I say I'm never getting VR, forget it, and take all the VR games off the follow list, my concern is that 2-3 years down the line I come back and say, oh, actually VRs are now cheaper and it actually does make some sense. I recently bought a Nintendo Switch and have done very little with it. And I kind of would like to see, kind of regret getting it, but whatever. This Space Seals game doesn't look interesting, so we'll take that off the follow list. Spacemancer, I'll give more time to. I'm not a big fan of space games in general, but some of them certainly will stand out and be different. Spaceline's from Far Out. Seems to be an emphasis on co-op gaming, which probably means I need to say no to it. See, it's like a space airline. This is what you're running. And I don't know if I really want to play a space airline simulating game. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think you are pretty much just simulating trips, and as the trips happen, you're potentially acting as a stewardess and delivering food and water to customers. It does seem like it's kind of a weird gimmick. Yeah, I think I can say no to that. It's probably a game that I didn't really look too hard at. Spaceflight Simulator. I don't know if I'd really buy it, and it's still in early access, so I'll leave it on the fall list. But you can see that it's overwhelmingly positive, so this may be the game worth playing as far as a Kerbal Space Program game. It doesn't visually look as good as Kerbal Space Program, but maybe it has more variety and realistic simulation to it as a possibility. Space Raiders in Space is some kind of comic book inspired. It looks like it might be a top-down shooter wave defense game. And the comic book art style probably was the thing that caught my attention, but the actual game may really just boil down to a tower defense type experience. And at a certain level, just having better animation and different types of animation on a tower defense type experience might elevate a tower defense game to actually be considered. Like it definitely did in this case. If this was just a standard tower defense game, I would have caught on and dismissed it very quickly. But no, instead it's taken a while for me to look at it and think about it and then decide against it. Here we have a game called Space Otter Charlie, which looks like it's a side-scroll shooter game with some platforming. I don't think this is my type of game. Yeah. You're flying around in 0G, shooting all over the place. Also, it's not really relevant, so that can go away too. And then we have Space Love Delta here, which looks like it is trying to be lewd, but it has no relevancy, and it does have an 18 plus patch. But yeah, if we take it off the screen for a second, I'll just check all the screenshots to see if there's anything surprising there. No, the animation looks bad. It doesn't seem to be really promising that much. It kind of feels like it would have been fine if you were going to make a 45-minute animated porn with these characters, but that's about it. You wouldn't want to make a whole game around it. And then last we have Space Haven, which I bet all the games we do on the fall list cleanup on Monday will also start with the word space. This is a similar game in that you're running a entire society on a spaceship more than just a space plane. You could see taking the concepts of FTL and trying to take it to the next level. And I can see this is very positive, but I can also see it's early access. So I think I want to probably leave that on the fall list. I'm in an interesting position, certainly, because of the Steam summer sale. I really don't have time to look at thousands of games on sale. You can also see in the background they have lightened the blue even more during this event. Let's see if it stops. It's an actual pattern too, and not just a solid color. But yeah, it seems like you're gonna scroll down infinitely, and at no point will you see the dark blue as much. They are very slowly boiling the frog and changing the color from blue to a lighter blue And eventually I assume it is going to just get lighter and lighter on blue, and then one day people are going to wake up and it's white. They might take multiple steps to get to that point. But yeah. They really don't have a great justification to spend a lot of money buying games at the moment. And the Steam Prime Day sale, which should be definitely low priority, gets in the way. There's a decent discount here for a brand new Lego Star Wars game, so I could see that. I could see getting a Dying Light Stay Human, and here we have free fun this way, free fun this way, which I guess that probably points towards a free games. Here they have sales by genre and theme, so puzzle games, free-to-play games, anime games, casual games. They're probably suggesting genres that I play or have played in the past. It seems like there's quite a lot of categories that they're highlighting. 50% off, and I guess at a certain level you would want to just see what other percentage you're getting. We're not seeing big discounts on the AAA things. 75% off for some Devil May Cry game, but not the main one. 70% off for the Doom franchise bundle. 75% off for the original Doom. Conan games. Players like me love this. Persona 4 Golden here for $14.99 is not a bad idea. The Master Chief Collection for $15.99 is not a bad idea. Some of these Japanese games you should get 50% off and just accept that they're never going to be any cheaper. Children of Morta at $7.47 is not a bad deal. Not a lot of relevancy to play Far Cry 5, but getting it for $11 if you want to play the Far Cry series, it's not terrible. Dragon Age, they just announced a new Dragon Dogma game, not a new Dragon Age game. No indication there. Control Ultimate Edition, if you've never played it, maybe. Ark just came out of early access, and now would be a great time to buy that. Not Raft just came out of early access. Ark, I don't know anything about. Brand new games getting 20% off isn't terrible, or 6-month-old games like Tiny Tina's Wonderlands getting sold. The Sims 4, you have to be careful. $5 is a decent price, but how much DLC is around that? Because there's a ton of DLC around The Sims. God of War, 20% off, pretty decent deal. The first Final Fantasy VII Remake game, 29% off is a pretty good deal for a Japanese game. They're giving away free trading cards again. Borderlands 3 for $14.99. Again, this is probably a great example of a game, though, that you're going to have to get the whole Ultimate Edition, and by the time you get the whole Ultimate Edition, you'll be back to $60. So it'll save you a little bit, but not a ton. Jedi Fallen Order, I don't think there's a ton of DLC around Fallen Order, so it would make sense to buy that. Then you have Soundpad, which is just a software, and RPG is a software. Interesting that they're kind of highlighting software as a category, even above management games and popular new releases. This is probably an adult game. Yeah, so be careful around that. It's kind of hard to get the mouse somewhere that won't pop up an overview pop-up, which I don't know if Steam is selling impressions. It probably isn't, but if they are definitely cheating with their layout to get as many impressions as possible. And yeah, if I was gonna do a lot of shopping, I would go to my wish list, which the whole point of maintaining the wish list and the fall list is to go to the wish list and then sort games by the deepest discounts, pick the ones that are potentially there, and usually that gets up to about 300 games when all is said and done. And then I'll also sort through games that are just the lowest price regardless of discount, because there often are games that are like 69 cents, but they can't be discounted to 90% off because they never were. Um, um, they never were that expensive in the first place. So I would go cheapest games, actual price, and most discounted games. I would open a bunch of games until I have somewhere around $300 to $600 worth of stuff in the shopping cart. Then I would start curating that down to about 300, and then I would start curating it down to about 150, 100 in total. I'm scrolling down my Twitter feed at the moment, and I'm seeing a lot of video game companies now putting out posters and slogans, just once again being pro Roe versus Wade. So at the very least, I would say this isn't a case of the companies taking it easy and simply saying nothing after the Supreme Court decision and just going, oh, well, good, we don't have to promote that anymore, or we don't really care about that, or we don't really support that. Particularly as far as Roe versus Wade, I suspect companies actually do support it quite a bit, even if it would save them some money as far as paying for health insurance, if they didn't. But that is mostly what I'm saying here, is a lot of tweets. I'm not going to call it outrage tweets or anything like that. It's a lot of response and a lot of reiterations of what they've already said in the past. Nobody's suspiciously gone silent, and nobody's pulling a 180. Otherwise, since it is Friday, though, no games really have come out, and no other bits of news have come out. Since this announcement was done on a Friday, it certainly will be interesting to see how many people are still fired up on Monday, or will this be potentially a case where the reactions die down and cool down over the weekend? I severely doubt it, though. I severely suspect we're going to see a lot of protesting and a lot of anger and a lot of posting, frankly, maybe from both sides of the issue throughout the weekend, and I wouldn't be surprised if it continues and does not settle to any kind of new normality for a while. Again, though, none of that really has anything to do with video games, and I tried my best in this 4-hour stream to mostly stay away from that. I think I mostly did. That's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list, or a gift card for Steam, or any game you'd like to see me cover, and then maybe eventually I'd get around to it, but no promises. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.